Carl, you need to put this on.
I'm going to get you set up here for
For
recording.
the patrons from far away that came to the temple, we're here in the Interstate Center.
I'm going to clip that on your shirt, Carl.
Or Dave, when he
It
starts
was
talking,
also used for the regional sports tournaments back in the 60s and 70s.
I can kind of hang out up here for a
Okay.
few minutes.
Okay.
until
Do that,
I'm
Brett.
feeling good about it.
Now we're going to turn left onto Main Street here, Curly. Great to have Curly. He's
I can hang out up here until we're
okay.
the best bus driver we've had all day.
This morning. Right.
So
That's not wallet.
we'll be hearing
What's that?
today.
That's not your
I'm
driver's
Carl.
license and Tim
We'll have
recommending.
Steve and we
That's my
have
brother's,
Dave
probably.
and Mike and a whole bunch of people talking to us today.
I can take it out and give it to him. Get me up if you want him to hold on to it. Just maybe his
Yeah, left. Oh, yep.
Yeah. And
What's that?
you're sitting on this.
Something on.
Yeah.
Hey. Running that for him, so whenever he can turn it off when he's not talking.
Curly, to kind of pause here a little bit as we go by the temple. On the, of course, on the left is the newly remodeled temple. It's going to be rededicated in December. On the right is a statue to the original Mesa pioneers. You got Crisbin, Pomeroy, Serine, and Robeson in front. In the back, you got a woman and a child. I like to think of that woman as being Caroline LeSueur Mallory and one of her children. And maybe the statue may have been turned around and she should be up here in front. But Gordon B. Hinckley dedicated that in 1988. Okay, Kurt, you can continue on. And of course, across the street here on LeSueur Street is the new visitor center that just opened. And next to it's a Deseret Book and a whole housing development here, apartments. Up on the top floor, the visitor center president lives, Elder Westover lives on the top floor. And behind there, the sister missionaries that work there in the center, serve in the center, live in the apartments behind it. And anyway, they can use this light rail parking area on the right for all the church types of things too. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Okay. We're going to turn left, Curly, at Hibbert. But I had there on my handout to you that there's one temple served the whole southern United States and Mexico when it first opened and had the first Spanish endowments there. Left in Hibbert. So on the left here, on this corner here was John Taylor LeSueur's home from 1906 to 1921.
Where was it? On the
Right here on the left corner, the Benedictine University is now there, but that's where his home site was. They donated their home for a hospital, at least part of their home, and then they built the South Side Hospital there, and then it got torn down. They built this university, but many people here were born in this South Side Hospital. It was on this corner, including my brother, Wayne.
Well, ask how many people were.
Yeah. Let's have a show of hands. How many people were born there? Whoa! Half the bus was born there. Okay.
Carl.
Yes.
Do you know that kitty corner to that was Charles T. LeSueur's house?
Oh, I didn't know that. Kitty corner to that is Charles T. LeSueur's house. Is his son. Okay, so now we're going up here, and we're going to have Curly pause at this stoplight, which he'd probably do anyway. But if you look to the left when we get here, halfway down the block on the right was Libby LeSueur's house. She was Leroy's widow, and she raised her family there. Then afterwards, Waldo LeSueur occupied the house. It's just a little bit further here, Curly. You can see there's a parking lot just right there in the middle of this block there. That's where Libby LeSueur lived, and then Waldo LeSueur and his family. Okay, then when it turns green, we'll continue on.
If these little streets around here could talk, we'd be in big trouble.
Were you a little kid over there? Or were you in high school?
So, yeah, no, the kids were all born in the Southside Hospital and grew up there their lives until they went away to college or wherever. On Don's family,
So if they lived here, their moms just walked down the street, delivered them, and they lived here. Their mothers just walked down the street, delivered the babies, and came on home, right?
yeah, that was convenient. In fact, that's somewhere my brother was born. My parents lived next door to Waldo and Louise, and they had their oldest son there too.
Okay.
That's a long light.
Are we turning or going straight?
It's going straight. Yeah.
Right turn, U-turn.
We're gonna go. Yeah, we're gonna go straight and then right on the next corner. Oh yeah, to get around there. Yeah.
By the way, so who is Waldo in relation to everybody?
Okay, so Libby Nelson was Leroy's widowed wife. Roy was one of William F.'s sons, and then Waldo was one of Leroy and Libby's sons. We have a lot of descendants from, in fact, 30 people on the bus. 30 out of 50 are descendants from Leroy and Libby, from their children Waldo, Wallace, and Rowene. Okay, Curly's getting the job done here. On the left here is an apartment building. It's on the site where James W. LeSueur's Temple Court development was. So just a little horseshoe-shaped series of bungalows that John P. LeSueur lived for a while, one of Williams. And pause here, Curly, on the right, that house with the blue frame, on the White House with the blue frame, fascia. That was the O.S. Stapley home. O.S. Stapley was a counselor to James W. in the stake presidency, and his son, Delbert L. Stapley, became an apostle in the church. Okay, we can turn right here. In the second house on the right, with a couple of lion statues on the front porch, it was James W. LeSueur's home. James W. was John T.'s son, who succeeded him as the stake president and helped get the temple constructed and built, was really instrumental in all that. That's his home there at the Lions. We continue on, Curly, and on this next corner on the right, not this Pasadena, but on Serine on the right, this large building that used to be a senior citizen center is where Charles Mallory built the first adobe home in Mesa in 1879. This one with the white columns here on the right and all. So this is where Caroline Mallory was the first LeSueur here, and she died that summer before they got up on the Mesa. And when they finally made it up, and you can turn right here at this street. Anyway, they got up on the Mesa. Her widower, Mallory, with the 6 kids there, he built the first adobe home in Mesa there. I think Pomeroy had a kind of a wooden, not too fancy of a home. It was the first home. This is the first nice one. So on the back here is somehow the LeSueur's brothers-in-law to Mallory. Keep going, Charlie. And I'm here on the next corner is where William F. and John T. and their mother Caroline lived. It's been torn down, but this office building on the left is where their house was. The office building on the right hand
across the street?
No, right here on this corner,
right here.
right here, 50 feet from the bus, right there, is where William F. and John T. and Caroline lived. At the time, John T. had the one boy, James W., and William S.'s first child was born there, William C. or Will, and they lived, right there. So
Was that before they went to St. John's?
yes, they lived here for 15 months, and then they left for St. John's. Okay, Curly, let's see, what do I say we're doing here? Let me just a minute. Let me see where I'm at. Okay, we go up to Main Street. No, turn left. Turn left. Turn left here. These stoplights aren't cooperating with you, Curly. You want Steve to jump out and hit that button on the light?
Yeah, how about that? If I hop out, I might not be able to hop back. So tell people why they stayed here 15 months and then left.
Yeah. So the LeSueurs were here, and that first summer they were here was one of a record heat summer. And the Salt River, which always flowed year round, dried up. It had just a little trickle. The Mesa, the new Mesa settlement, was using to water their gardens. Well, the people in Phoenix who were here before didn't get any water. They came up here, 20 men got on their horses, got their guns, came up here and talked to Sarine, the leader, and said, hey, you're taking our water, let it go. And so they made an agreement to let it go for 3 days. And if it wasn't enough to make it down to Phoenix would let them take the little trickle and water the gardens. And so the Salt River did not make it to Phoenix. And okay, so on the left is the Mesa Second Ward Chapel.
Not Kitty Corner.
Pardon me?
Kitty Corner. Yeah.
Kitty corner on the left. Oh, turn right here, Curly. On the left is the Mesa Second Ward. The only thing that's original there is a chapel. A lot of you attended Rowene LeSueur Anderson's funeral there in that original chapel. This next building on the left is the Mesa First Ward building, and that's all been rebuilt. But in the back of that was a church built a swimming pool, and that's what Rowene records as swimming in that swimming pool a lot. On the right here is is the MAC here. It's not the BYU MAC, but it's the Mesa Art Center here in performing arts. But okay, we turn left here on Main. Not another red light. Come on.
Who's the artist that does all these different?
I think they were different people.
And they would race.
Yeah.
They would race to somewhere else. Not come back.
So notice as we go down Main Street, they have a lot of nice statues. Mesa. A lot of you that live here, of course, know that, but we have some out-of-towners that enjoy the sculptures here. Now we're going to turn left here, and the building there that says the Castle on Main it'll be on the right-hand side of the street as we turn, but you can see it out the left now. That was where the LeSueur men's clothing store was for a while. So William F. LeSueur's son Leroy had a son Wallace, who started that men's store with his brother-in-law, Rowene's husband, Glenn Anderson. And they were down the street for a while, then they ended up here. But we would come over from Phoenix. I grew up in Phoenix. My dad was a high school principal there. We'd come over for back-to-school shopping here. And let's see, by a show of hands, how many people have bought clothes from LeSueur's men's store?
Most of us never got a discount.
You always got a discount or free. Yeah. Okay. And we got on the bus. So after Wallace died, his sons Keith and Bill took over. Is Bill here too? I know Keith is. Yeah, Bill and Keith are here on the bus. Raise your hands there. Bill and Keith were the owners after their father passed away. And I think Glenn retired about then sometime. But so So that LeSueur men's store, the second location in the 60s was this one here, Castle on Main. And we're gonna go back to the first location from the 50s and 40s. That, yeah, I'm telling them right, aren't I, Bill? That's a place. That's the third. Yeah, the first location was another little place, but they had something in the 40s for a couple of years. But yeah, that was actually the third location. But the second location is here where it says books. That's where they were in the 50s mostly, and then that I think you had a fire there, and you moved down to the other location.
All right, we're returning next.
Okay, we're going to slow down here, Curly, and on the left see the Nile Theater, established 1924. Don tells me that's where the LeSueur Mercantile Company store was. Is that, anybody know any different than that? And then the Nile Theater was established there afterwards in 1924. So that's when John T. would have been 72. Maybe he was retired. That came there next. But that's the way Don remembers it. That was the LeSueur men's store.
Is that because of our family has so much drama in it all the time?
Okay, and behind there we see there's a picture in the new visitor center. Behind there was another LeSueur company building behind the Nile Theater, facing south was another LeSueur building. I'm not sure whose that was. But we'll continue on here, Create the Country Club. Now, the church in those days didn't have gyms or recreation halls in them. They had movable benches that they moved out to the walls of the chapel. They had their dances and things in the chapels. But here, with this restaurant, this Il Bagnio restaurant is on the site of the Mazzona. And so James Davis helped get that constructed. Turn right here, Curly. This is what the Mazzona was. That they had the big dances there. How many people's parents went on dates there at the Mazzona to the dances or whatever? Oh, how many people went there to dances? Oh, okay, look at that. A lot of people went there. All right. Man, you guys are really old. Okay, we'll turn right here on Country Club, and we'll go up to the 202 freeway and turn right. Now, to Gilbert Road and turn left, yes. Now, in this country club, Dave has researched how many ancestors he's got buried there. This is where John T. LeSueur is buried, in the cemetery. The old part is actually over on Center Street. We'll be passing the new part here on Country Club. But Dave can tell us about the ancestors buried there.
John, you tell me. Oh, John.
That's that too.
Oh, you want the
You tell me.
microphone?
So John T. is buried there. And his wife, Geneva, is buried there. A lot of our ancestors on our mother's side, our mother was in Ellsworth, are buried there. So we have 21 direct ancestors buried in the Mesa Cemetery. My son pointed that out. I didn't realize that. But Leo, my grandfather, Leo, and my father, Leo Robertson, are buried there. My first name is Leo, and my son John's first name is Leo. His first son's name is Leo. But at any rate, there are a lot of LeSueurs in that cemetery.
No, it's going back anyway. I've got it.
Okay, now
It's recording.
we're going to have introductions from Adele. As we're going to go just out on the freeway and get started, but now's a good time for your introductions. Oh, well, whatever you want to do.
Probably need to stay.
You need to speak close to the mic and right into it. And I may interrupt you a couple times, but all right.
So, my name is LeSueur, and almost 39 years ago, I married into this great family. And my husband and I are co-chairs with Dave and Nancy on the Activities Committee, and we want to welcome all of you here today. And lots of times you'll see on the papers there's a G with a number, and I just...
And this is Larry LeSueur, and I am married to Adele, and I'm G6, so we're of the young crowd here. And this is the cemetery Carl's pointing out, where a lot of our ancestors are at.
My brother and father are buried just inside the gate here.
Okay, we wanted to. I wanted to just give a quick overview of our trip today, and I just wanted to start off by saying that one of the things that I don't have a whole lot of talents and abilities, but one of the things that I have learned from a wonderful man that was a leader of mine over 40 years ago when I was in England serving a mission for the church. He taught me about enthusiasm. And so what I wanted to tell you is that if we don't really have a lot of enthusiasm, we can change that, and we can get a lot of enthusiasm. And that is, he told me this. He said, in order to become enthusiastic, all you need to do is just say to yourself as quickly as you can, I am enthusiastic because I feel enthusiastic. I feel enthusiastic because I am enthusiastic. I am enthusiastic because I feel enthusiastic. So we're all these wonderful cousins, and we can tell it if we're not feeling it, then just do that to yourself, and we're going to have a great trip, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and hopefully a lot of enthusiasm. Wanted to let you know that there is a bathroom on the bus here. We have some planned rest stops. I think in Payson is where the next one is. So just be aware of that. Wanted to let you know that in St. John's we have a Mexican food catered from El Cupidos there in St. John's. It should be really good. We've got a lot of choices. Hopefully you'll enjoy that. Our job with the activities committee is to make sure that you're not thirsty and you're not hungry on this trip, and that you eat well. So hopefully we can take care of that. Then we will then also have sandwiches available in Eager, and things to put in that. If we don't have time to eat there in Eager, you can take it in a bag and bring it on the bus home. Wanted to. What was that?
Even the men have to sit down in the bathroom, Curtis says.
Okay, everybody has to sit down when we use the bathroom in the back.
Do the men have to put the toilet seat down when we're done?
Yeah, you're going to stay sitting down.
The reason for that is, as Curtis says, it's a moving target with all the bus going back and forth.
Okay, just wanted to explain the name tag. So, Denton did a wonderful job of making all these name tags, and if you don't have a name tag, she's got extra ones that she can make you a name tag. But basically it shows where you tie in to the LeSueur family and our relatives, whether you're so you can see quite quickly what generation you are as well. So we're grateful for that. So we hope everyone wears a name tag today. Anyway, I wanted to introduce our Dave LeSueur, who is part of our executive committee on the LeSueur Family Organization, and he's got a little presentation and some help to explain what's going on with the LeSueur Family Organization. We're grateful to have Dave and Nancy with us.
Clip it on there. I can get it. Let me get it for you.
Good morning. I wanted to echo Adele's greeting to you. We're so excited to have you all here and to meet cousins we haven't known before. Little known fact, just to preface my comments, Mike and I on this bus are descendants of Leo LeSueur, one of John Taylor's 10 sons. And Leo had one son. He had two daughters. They both died in infancy. And one son, our grandfather. So we have no first cousin LeSueurs. And grew up in Mesa, not knowing any of our cousins until Mike got to high school and met Don and others. I didn't know any. I met my first LeSueurs, really. I met Don over at Mesa Community College, but then went up to BYU. And there I met one of the other, there were 3 David LeSueurs that I was aware of. I was one. Waldo's son attended Mesa High before several years before I did. But the other David LeSueur was from Burbank. And he is Steve's brother, and David's wife Mary is here. And David and I met at BYU, and Mary just told me a funny little story. She was dating David, and she had a friend named Christy Atherton that I was dating. And Mary saw Christy and said, "Christy, are you dating anybody these days?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm dating Dave LeSueur." And Mary just about passed out. They were getting serious, and they really confused her. We're delighted to have Mary and her son with us this morning. When I returned from, finished BYU, spent 10 years in the corporate world in California, moved back to Gilbert, and just felt prompted to call Carl and ask if there was any way I could be involved in the next family reunion for the LeSueurs. I wanted to get to know my LeSueur cousins. And he said, there sure is, and that's been a great blessing to us to get to know a number of you. I have sent to you a little handout with the LeSueur family organization on it. I just wanted to state very briefly how we're organized and what it is we're trying to accomplish. So if you'll find that little presentation that came back, and if there are extra ones, if you would send them forward, I'd be grateful. We'll use them again in just the extra ones in St. John. Did those all get all the way to the back? Those little presentations? Great. So we refer to it as the LFO, the LeSueur Family Organization. So from time to time when you get something through MailChimp from the LFO, make sure your laptop doesn't discard it before you get to look at it. It may put it in a junk folder or somewhere else, but that's us. We're trying to reach out. So the LeSueur Family Organization, LFO. Our organizational structure is we have an executive committee with a president, a vice president, a secretary-treasurer, and 3 other executive committee members. The executive committee is tasked with accomplishing our organizational purpose, succession planning, and recruiting leadership for our subcommittees. The LFO purpose I've listed up above there, and that is to strengthen family relationships and promote and preserve family history. Today's one of our activities to strengthen family relationships and promote and preserve family history. So these presentations, Daryl's boys, Breck and Nathan, have been kind enough to video record for us all day and to audio record the presentation so we can capture it for those who aren't here. We have a number of current subcommittees. The Activities Committee, the Research and Publication Committee, a Membership Engagement Committee, that's getting to know who belongs to us and where they are, and you've been enlisted to assist. Our Newsletter Committee, a Family Search Committee, or Family History Committee, and a Finance Committee. If you'll turn your page over, we state that we are in need of and intend to make good use of volunteers to assist with each of those subcommittees. So if you have an interest in serving and are able to serve, please contact the committee chairperson of the committee you have an interest in serving on. Some, as you can see, are doing double and triple duty currently. The current subcommittee and current executive and subcommittee leadership is as follows. Carl has served for a number of years now as our president. Don LeSueur has been vice president, continues to serve. Daryl LeSueur served as our secretary-treasurer for a number of years, but has just left. He and Teresa on a mission to Hawaii, I might add. Go see him. And then Mike and I serve as executive committee members. Jay LeSueur has just recently replaced Daryl and serves on the executive committee as our new secretary treasurer. Our subcommittees on the activity committee are Adele and Larry LeSueur, whom you've both heard from. You've heard from both of them this morning. Mike and Don LeSueur chair our membership engagement committee. Don because he knows everybody, and Mike because he has such a great interest. Our newsletter committee is headed by one of mine and Nancy's daughters, Carrie Thompson, and Mike supports her. We have on our research and publication committee Carl, Don, and Mike, and Steve has been a big help to us recently. Our family search committee is made up of Dana Denton, Carrie Thompson, and Mike, and our finance committee has been Daryl and Jay. We'll get one other person on that finance committee now that Jay has left. Daryl has left, excuse me. I've listed our contact information in that last frame, so if you needed to contact us about serving on a subcommittee or for any other reason, please feel free to do so. Do you have any questions I can respond to about the LeSueur family organization? We're not a dues-paying club and no one has been assessed, but from time to time, generous members of the family will send a little donation, and Jay banks that immediately and puts it to work. Any questions about the organization?
What are the primary financial needs? What are they used for?
So Susan has asked, Mike's wife has asked, what are the primary financial needs? And there aren't many. There are a few miscellaneous expenses. We really have underwritten this bus tour to be self-sustaining. We may draw a few funds, a few excess funds, but really the fees we've charged should cover this tour just fine. Carl.
So in the past, we have used that for 2 head markers, headstones. The original John LeSueur, the original John LeSueur is buried in Bountiful, Utah, and his sandstone headstone was eroding, and so we designed a nice big one with the names of his 6 children. Or maybe it's all 8. We had 2 that died when they were young. We put it on the headstone and had it put in the Bountiful Cemetery. And then the other headstone was John LeGraley, their uncle who helped finance their trip to America. He was buried in the Salt Lake Cemetery, and he may have had an old wooden headstone, but there wasn't anything there when I went up to Salt Lake. In fact, I couldn't even find him under the LeGraley, and I thought, well, I'll try the G's. And he was listed as John Lee Graley. And so I found where his grave was, and we had another headstone put where he's buried. So that's what we've used the principal expenditures in the past, the donations. We hope to do maybe something else like that in the future. One of the generous donors, well, we had a couple of generous donors. We have some funds still left.
Carl, a few weeks ago I went to visit my cousin Jean K. Clinton, and she has paid a woman full time to do LeSueur research and genealogy, and she's gone into Jersey Islands, and she's come up with all kinds of new stuff. But Jean K, I think, would love to be a part, and she contributes, any amount of money that would be needed. If we could kind of combine her research with ours, I think that would be good.
We need to get her on the
Elaine LeSueur Beckstead just communicated that Jean K. Quinton has hired a full-time Quinton has hired a family historian to do LeSueur work in the Channel Islands. So she has suggested, if you couldn't hear her, that we invite her to be part of the LFO. She's very, very interested, and we'll do that. We'll make note of that. I'm going to, before we have Jay make a brief financial presentation and a general presentation, I'm going to hand the mic back to Larry LeSueur for a couple of quick housekeeping items.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to mention how we're going to be on a tight schedule today, and you're going to be told what time you need to be back on the bus from each stop. So we need to make sure that we're very, very careful with that time so that we get back, so that we can get going to our next place. We have to do a count when we can't leave until we have everyone accounted for. So we really appreciate being really careful with listen to what time we need to be back on the bus so that we can keep this bus moving. Thank you.
Jay, can you slide up here and I'll share my seat with you?
Here's
there's an empty seat right behind me, Jay.
Feel like a drunk trying to walk through here.
Started early today.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let's see, put this on me here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. So actually, I'm not going to talk anything financial today. That's a good thing, right? Don't hear any applause. Okay. So actually, I was asked to talk a little bit about generations and the importance or the objectives of generation studies. So first of all, do we have? Do you understand that when we say G3, G4, G5? So Carl's a G4. Is that what we decided? Say, are there any other G4s on this bus? Who's that?
I don't know. I'm a G something.
You're a G something?
G whiz.
You're a G5, Scott.
I'm sorry. What?
Look right behind Lavona.
I guess I'm a 4.
She says she has 4 names on her tag, so that makes her G4, right?
No,
No.
5.
Okay, just that is.
We We didn't put John. The first generation's not on our tags.
Yeah,
Carolina.
the first generation isn't listed on there, but
Carl, I have
but Carl is a so usually generations
If somebody wants to see that.
everybody the same age that you grew up with, right? Generally, who we grew up with. Well, Carl's kind of a what do you call it? Unique situation. Pardon?
There's about a half a dozen of us still.
About a half dozen. Okay, still around. But Carl grew up with most all of that group there. But he actually is a different generation. When you have a situation where someone marries, has a lot of kids, and spouse dies and remarries, and that's what happened to Carl. But it's important to kind of understand how that works a little bit, so we can kind of know where we fit into the generation situation. Speaking of that, with each generation, there's a little change, right? The way we think, the way we vote, the way we buy, the way we learn, all those different things based on the generation that we're raised in. Here's one for you. Here, a mom texts this to his son. Hi, son. What do IDK, LY, and TTYL mean? And he texts back, I don't know. Love you and talk to you later. The mother replies, it's okay, don't worry about it. I'll ask your sister. Love you too. So that kind of little definition or understanding of kind of the generation change that we deal with. And one's own personal identity is best gained by knowing who you are, where you came from, and how you came into existence. And family history gives that true identity, and learning it is advantageous and beneficial in many ways. So when I was in the mission home in Salt Lake City back in 1975, while I was in a meeting there, the president of the mission home, while speaking to us, to my surprise, I hadn't really talked to him or met him, but he singled me out and he said, in a large group of missionaries, he told everyone that my grandfather was the first president of the Mesa, Arizona Temple, and also had other leadership callings and was influential in the decision for the temple to be built in Mesa. Now that wasn't quite true, and I wasn't sure about those things were true, and so I just smiled and nodded my head like, yeah, sure, right? Because I was just kind of a young missionary and a young man, and I didn't really, wasn't keeping up on that stuff. But later, when I was out in the mission field in Northern California, I had a member there show me a book where it had an account of James W. LeSueur and his vision. What's that book called? Life Everlasting? You ever heard of that book? Had an account in there about James W. LeSueur's vision while he was visiting his brother in the spirit world. And I was surprised by this as well. I'd never heard about it. Sometime later after that, I received, and I think I'd inquired to my Aunt Louise LeSueur about that situation or about that story, and she sent me a packet of history of James W. LeSueur that was written by him, and I was just fascinated by it. James W. LeSueur I'm not a descendant of him. I'm on the other side. Through William Francis LeSueur, not John Taylor LeSueur, but I was fascinated by it. And as I read it, I was interested in the accounts, which included many successes that he had and some difficult times and financial difficulties. And I realized there was much to be learned about learning and reading about our ancestors. So I was grateful for that information. And later I learned that the temple president was not my grandfather nor my great-grandfather, but John Taylor LeSueur, who was my great-grandfather's brother, and James W. was his son, was the son of John Taylor LeSueur. So just a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago actually, I was in my office working, and I had someone in there that I was treating, an older gal, and she told me that her husband was out in the waiting room. And so when I was done, I went out and I met him. And 94-year-old gentleman, I believe. And he told me that he grew up in Springerville, Eager area, and that he knew William Francis LeSueur, my great-grandfather. And I was just surprised because I don't know that I know anybody that knew him, or I'm sure there's probably, if he's around, well, there's others. Yes?
Carl knew him, his dad.
No, I know this. I know this now, and so then I looked after, this gentleman was 94 and William Francis died in 1941. Does that sound right, Carl?
Yes.
And so, this man would have been 14, and so he did know William Francis LeSueur. I don't know, it just fascinated me. It shouldn't be so fascinating because my mother just passed away, and many of you knew Nina, and she was 100 years old when she passed away. And the great thing about that is she had great, how far do we go back, Kelly? Great grandkids that knew her. So I think that's pretty cool because John LeSueur would be my great grandfather. And the fact that they knew their great grandmother while they were here is just a blessing to them, I believe. It's actually know him. But he told me that he knew William Francis LeSueur, and he said that he was a good man, well respected in the community, and that his wife, his second wife, Elna, who is Carl's grandmother, delivered most of the children up there in that area after she came there and married William Francis LeSueur. So that was an interesting thing to hear and understand from him. So here's another one for you while I'm in the middle of this. How do baby boomers change a light bulb? Anybody know that? How a baby boomer changes a light bulb? Well, actually they don't. They just keep talking about how great the old one was. Don't we do that a little bit? I'm in that category, I believe. So our objective in learning and understanding our ancestors is to know who they were and the challenges that they faced and the lessons as well as their values that we can take from their lives and help to improve our own lives. And starting with John and Caroline LeSueur's decision to join the church and to come across the Atlantic, come to America, how that changed lives for all of us, and how we are here today, and how most of us were born and raised out here in the American West. And we can learn from their hard work and their devotion. We can learn from John Taylor LeSueur, whose leadership and foresight, and his brother William Francis, his loyalty and devotion to his family, along with their wives and their sisters, with the pioneer spirit and the struggle and the strengths which we may never fully comprehend. And hopefully today, from this journey that we take today, that we might understand that a little bit more and have a better gratitude and understanding of it. One last one here for you. Why does the older generation have a problem with this generation of young, lazy kids? Well, let's see if I can get this last part right. I don't know. They didn't do anything to deserve it. That wasn't real good. But with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mike LeSueur, who is a great grandson of John Taylor LeSueur, and he's on the executive committee with some of the rest of us. He's going to talk about let's see, what are you going to talk about? The subcommittee?
Research committee and
there you go.
Membership engagement
Committee. And Mike's better at telling jokes than I am. He shares many of them with us, and so we'll hear from him now.
Thank you, Jay. Just listening to Jay and listening to Carl and my brother Dave and we're going to listen to Dena. And Adele and Larry, Steve, just reinforces to me what a blessing it's been to be engaged in this LeSueur Family History Organization. I've got to know a lot of good people, and it's been very rewarding. Dave, can you hold that? I'm on two committees. Well, I'm on several committees, but two committees I want to talk to you about. The first is the Membership Engagement Committee. So we have about 400 relatives identified with their email addresses. And you are all on this, I believe. And I'm going to pass these rosters back, and I would like you to look up your name and make sure your information is correct, that you're the proper generation, that I've got you listed with the proper ancestors, that your email is correct, that your name is correct. So the rosters, I'm going to pass one down this side and one down that side, and I'm going to pass a pin with it so you can make any corrections that need to be made, okay? And this helps us stay in touch with you, because like my wife tells me, it's all about communication, okay? So I'm going to start up here on this side, give it to Steve, and here's a pin for this side. That would be great. And I'm going to start up here, Carl, and okay, here's a red one, Steve, and Carl, give me that orange one back, and all. So they're alphabetized by last name and then by first name, so you can look up your name. And while you're doing it, if you see your siblings or somebody that needs to be on this roster that isn't on the roster, write it on the back, or it's double printed, but somehow put it on there somewhere, or come up to me afterwards so we can put them on there. At least their name, and then we can get their other information. So that's the Membership Engagement Committee. One other thing I want to tell you about the Membership Engagement Committee. So right now, the way we're engaging our relatives is through this newsletter that doesn't come out at any given time, just when it's needed. So that's how we kind of advertise this activity. And there have been, how many of you have received the newsletter? It's put out by MailChimp, and so your email will send it directly to spam. So you have to be careful not to delete it, because it'll go to your social or your forums or your updates or your promotion folder instead of to your inbox, instead of to your primary inbox. But we hope to have some of our research that we collect in those newsletters and other communication. So watch out for those. And if you want your siblings or others who aren't on the roster to receive it, let me know, or put it on this roster that we're passing around. The next committee that I want to talk to you about is the research committee. So that was interesting information about our Quinton. What's her first name? Jeannie? Jeannie K. Quinton's. Jean. So
She's Malcolm LeSueur's daughter.
So let me tell you a little interesting story about her.
Thank you.
We were in China. My brother and his wife and Susan and I were in China on a tour, a large group, and this tour company had another group, and somehow the two groups merged at one place. And this woman I did not know came up to me and said, "Are you a LeSueur?" And I said, "Yes." She said, I'm Jean Quinton, and I'm a physician. And the treadmills that we use to test people's hearts, you know, they walk on a treadmill and you do their EKG while they're exercising. Those are Quinton treadmills. Quinton her husband was quite an inventor and entrepreneur, and patented a lot of medical equipment and became quite wealthy. And he's passed away, but Jean hasn't. She's in Salt Lake, is that correct? In Provo. So I'm telling this about the research committee. We want to get her on our committee. We don't know how the LeSueurs got to Jersey. The LeSueur, as far as I'm aware, is only traced back to like the 1600s, early 1600s in Jersey. So how did they get to Jersey? I'm going to tell you another interesting story. Dwayne, are you here? So Dwayne back there, you would do better telling this story, Dwayne. I'm going to mess it up, but he was having a family reunion for his own kids one time, and one of his kids' email, he made a little boo-boo, and the email went to a Canadian LeSueur. The Canadian LeSueur's name is Max LeSueur. So Max LeSueur in Canada is invited to Dwayne's family reunion. And so Max sends this email back to Dwayne and says, I would love to come to your reunion. I'm excited to learn about my relatives in the United States. Well, at any rate, when Dwayne was giving me the information for his family, that their email addresses and their contact information, who they are, he made the same boo-boo. And he gave me Max's email address. And so I get this email back. I'm really interested in your organization. I want to get the newsletter, and I didn't have a Max on my roster, and I thought maybe it was I didn't know who it was. At any rate, Dwayne explained to me finally who Max was. And Max has his LeSueur, so these are the Canadian LeSueurs, and he has them traced back to France, and his ancestors. Do you know what a French Huguenot is? So the Huguenots, the French Huguenots, were non-Catholic French people, and they were persecuted and killed in France, and there was a lot of religious persecution, and his LeSueurs were French Huguenots, and they went to the Netherlands, and then from the Netherlands they went to Canada. So assuming that most of the LeSueurs in Canada are that same line, most of the LeSueurs in Canada are from the Netherlands and then go back to France, and they've traced that. And he sent me a lot of his genealogy and information. But our research committee would like to fill in some of those spaces, and maybe with Jeannie's professional genealogist. Does anybody know? I keep calling her Jeannie. Professional information, professional genealogist. Does anybody know if that genealogist lives on Jersey?
No, he doesn't. She's Jean's cousin on her other side.
I see.
And she's hired her, but she's got the. I forwarded to some. I'm not sure who I did, but we're not. Maybe you might. But this girl's name is. This woman's name is Paige something, and I had forwarded to a few of you some of this stuff that she has, but I don't remember who I forwarded to.
Okay, so so she doesn't live in Jersey. She's a cousin on the other side of Jean's family, but she's a professional genealogist, and she has some results already. And so I'm interested to get Jean on our research committee. Carl's on the research committee. Carl knows if you have any questions about the LeSueur family, it doesn't matter whether it's William Francis or John P. Side. He'll know it.
Or the girls.
Or the girls, yeah. So that brings up another point. In the past, our LeSueur family organization has mainly been descendants of William Francis and John Taylor, but there were 5 sisters. 4 sisters. And we talked about Caroline Mallory in the first group to settle up on the Mesa and buried there in Mesa. The first adobe home in Mesa. But the other sisters, one was a Davis, One was a Mallory, one was a Warner, and the other was a Fackrell. Excuse me, got a little something in my throat. You have a little water here. So we're reaching out to them. Now, one of John T.'s favorite nephews was a man called No Fear Davis. No Fear Davis, are we going to see anything about him, Carl, in St. John's?
We'll see generally where he grew up.
So No Fear Davis, an interesting name, and I was
Really his name.
that was his full legal name, No Fear. So, and John, if you've read John T.'s memoirs, which are on Family Search, by the way, you'll read about No Fear, and you'll read John T.'s statement of what a great man, young man he was. He worked for John T. and was a great young man. But one of No Fear's descendants, Lyle Davis, he's about 85 years old and still working. He's a stock trader, lives in Salt Lake. Lyle Davis, No Fear's probably grandson, has done a lot of his family research. I'm still waiting to get his list, but he said, I'm your man, I'll get all of these, because I've got all the Davis descendants organized, and I'll send it to you. But so we're working on some of the sisters, but it's slow. And as you know, people tend to identify more with their father's name than their mother's name, and so sometimes it's hard to get the Davises interested in the LeSueur genealogy, but we'll see how that goes. That's one of our projects.
Hey, Mike, let me add to that. Microphone. So that I just want to add to what Mike said. Some of you may remember the LeSueur reunions we had in 1990 in Mesa. Had some of the sisters' descendants there. We had some Warners and Davises at some of those earlier reunions, but in the later reunion by 2000, we didn't have any, I don't think, that came. And Mike had me tell this on No Fear. So Jane LeSueur Davis was expecting a child, and she was having complications. And so they called in, I believe, the bishop and her husband gave her a blessing. And because she was real concerned, she was having troubles with concern the baby would be born well, and she was blessed that everything would be okay. And as the bishop walked out of the room, he told her, "Don't worry, Jane. Have no fear. Your baby will be okay." And so she named him No Fear.
She had no fear.
Here we go. She had no fear.
She gave birth to no fear.
So get this microphone set up. So back to the research committee. So there's several avenues we're working on, and maybe some of this research will require some money, but we're not asking for it now, maybe in the future. So tying us in, how we get back to France. But you know, how many of you know what indexing is? How many of you done any indexing? Indexing has made a huge difference in getting information about our ancestors, so that even though James, for example, on John T.'s side, James Casto and his wife Sarah Odekirk, this is Geneva's parents, neither one of them left a story. Neither one of them wrote their memoirs like John T. did. But there is so much information of places they went, where they moved, on Family Search, that it's easy to do research about them and write a biography about them. And so I've done that for James Casto and Sarah Odekirk. And it's really interesting. For me, it was very interesting. And I'm going to pass back my little biography of them for you to read as we travel. So Susan, if you could start that.
Is there any way to get a light on?
There you go.
Lights are above. Okay, and you can do your own individual light above. So John, would you pass half of those down this side? And there aren't enough for everybody, but maybe one per row. And then pass them back after you've read them, and then hand them back up so we can, when we get to St. John's, we can let those people read them as well. So we'll pass them back. You can read them as we travel when we aren't talking. Also, Lavona. So Lavona, does everybody know Lavona from Sedona?
Arizona.
Lavona from Sedona, Arizona. What a blessing she's been. Dave met her when he was serving in the Mission Training Center. Lavona was the organist there. And shall I tell that story, Dave, about the watch? Yes. So Lavona came up to Dave and said, Dave, I want you to have this timepiece that John T. gave to Geneva. And it's a gold-plated, beautiful watch.
Wow.
And so Dave has that. But Lavona sent this to me, and this is a story about the Crosbys, about John Alma. John Alma married Alice Geneva, one of John T.'s daughters, and had a really interesting story. And this is another way to communicate information about family history. Unfortunately, this is perishable and usually disappears with decades. So Dennis going to talk to us about Family Search in a minute, but I'm going to pass this back for you to read too. Even though it may not be your ancestor, it's very simple, and it's quite a very interesting way to put family stories where your kids can read them. One last story, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Denna. So let me just, yes? Yeah. Turn it off. Okay, you can turn the side light off.
Thank you, Carly.
Yeah.
The reading lights are all on.
Okay, you can turn your reading light on.
So when I learned that I had 21 direct ancestors buried in the Mesa Cemetery, my son John, which is right here, brought that to my attention. We decided for Memorial Day we were going to get all the grandkids and go to the cemetery, and their assignment for each of the grandkids, my grandkids, was to look up on Family Search a little information about each, and they would each have an ancestor assigned. I have 26 grandchildren. There are 21 ancestors. So, and give us a little minute, just a minute synopsis of what stuck out in their mind about this ancestor. So we did that. We got to the Mesa Cemetery, and at the first tombstone, I said, "What's the most important thing on that tombstone?" And one of the grandkids said the birthday. That's the most important. I said, that's important, all right. That's not the most important. And another one said, maybe the death day. I said, that is important too, but it's not the most important. Their name. That's important, but it's not the most important. The most important thing on that gravestone is the dash between the birthday and the death day. And why is that important? They looked at me, then they said, that represents their life. I said, exactly. Just knowing when they were born or when they died or what their name was doesn't tell you much about them. It connects you to a person, but not to get to know them. And so family history is a way to learn about that dash. And these articles that I'm passing back for you to read over as we travel will give you a few of the details. And it's been fascinating for me, like this summer, as you read about
Did I tell you
Sarah
we would
Odeker,
finish our presentation?
you'll find that she's
6
buried in the
miles this
Fort
side of
Bridger
Rye.
Cemetery. Well, this summer I went to Fort Bridger.
No.
And visited there, and saw where she was buried and where she
At a
lived.
certain point, we lose it.
In Lone
They're
Tree.
lost.
I think they're
It's
gone.
very interesting
I hear a
to
lot
me,
of chatting.
and helped me connect to her in a way that's hard for me to describe. But I'm a convert to family history. Now I'm going to give the baton to Dena, who's on our family search committee, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that.
My name is LeSueur Denton.
Have to hold it really close to your mouth.
My father was William Wallace LeSueur, and okay, I don't do much with microphones, so I have been interested in family history and genealogy ever since I was a little girl. My mom was very involved in family history, very involved in genealogy. I can't get it any closer.
There you go. You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. Okay. Anyway, my mother was always interested in family history and in genealogy, and I know that she and Louise, Waldo's wife, always were discussing family history, as well as my grandmother on my mother's side.
It's been going still.
So when family history, from the very beginning, when things started coming online and how it has evolved in the church
Sorry about
and
that.
with the applications. Now there's an application that you can get on your phone. It's called Family Search, let me look at it here. Family Tree. You can download it on your phone and make an account. And you don't have to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to have an account on Family Search. You can join and make your account and find your ancestors through the information that's on here. Some of it is through indexing. People who go through records that have been put online and they interpret it and report it it goes onto into the Family Search. There are a couple of things that I've really enjoyed about it. Mark keeps pushing the microphone closer, so sorry. One of the things that I've enjoyed about it is to go to the memories. If you go to your memory on here, just tap on my name, scroll over, and it has memories. And I've loaded pictures on here from family gatherings, and also from our mission that we served in Brussels, Belgium, and a lot of family things. My sister passed away in February, and I know her son has posted a lot of pictures and has uploaded a link to her funeral, so you can go there and listen to the funeral. The same with our mother, who passed away in 2018. There's a copy of her funeral on there. One thing, my dad passed away in 1970, and I don't think we have a recording of his voice. I don't think there's a recording of his voice back then. You know, in the olden days, you didn't, the cameras or the movie clips that you have, they didn't have voice with it. It was just a silent picture show. And so I think it's important to upload your voice on, you know, just record your voice. I know. Well, I recorded my mother when she turned 100. I recorded a poem. She recited a poem that she had learned in junior high, and I have that on my phone, and I'm going to upload it onto the Family Search website so that we can remember, even though it's a very old voice, it's her voice, and we can remember that. One of the other things that we have really enjoyed on Family Search is, or on the Family Tree app, are the family activities. Let me get back here. When you go to the menu, there are things that you can do. It says family history activities. And, well, before that, one of them is relatives around me. So if we turned on our phones, if you're a LeSueur, you definitely have relatives around you. But my husband and I, Mark Denton, he and I, we know are now 9th cousins. And one of our boys is actually a 4th cousin with his wife. And so it's interesting to find out, you know, how you're related to the people around you. But the other thing is the family history activities. And they have some fun things on there. I don't have any internet service right now, but there's you can do let me see, compare your face with an ancestor. So you take a picture of yourself, and it will go through and it will say, oh, you're 66% like your mother, and and it goes back and finds all the ancestors that you have some resemblance to. It's very interesting. And where your name came from, you can find out where your name came from. And there was another one that we did. I can't remember. Oh, people that you're related to, famous people you're related to. It's amazing how many people you're related to who are famous for one thing or another. In the next newsletter, I will have a step-by-step how you set up an account and how you can get to these different things. But just if you have it on your phone, or if you want to get it on your phone, go to the App Store, the Play Store, and look for Family Tree. And it's got some fun activities and a lot of information.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay, this is Mark, Dennis' husband, but I think one of the things that I'm noticing, my father's family is, my father was converted, so was a lot of work to be done, but anyone who has any kind of a memory, whether you think it's significant or not, that is a memory that is worth other people reading about about a relative, an ancestor, if you've had a personal experience with, even your father, your mother, your grandparents, those may not seem like important things to you, but they are important and will be important to your posterity. So you can load those into the memory section.
Yeah, you can upload things, you can type things in, you can take pictures and put in there. So there are a lot of options. Oh, and I passed out the name tags. I photocopied the name tags so that you don't have to go around and look at everyone's name tag and try to figure out how we're all related. You can look at this handout that I gave you, and it has all of the name tags on there.
I just wanted one other thing you can do on Family Search that I just discovered. How many of you have had a picture and you didn't know who was in the picture because it wasn't written on the back? Isn't that frustrating? On Family Search, when you upload a picture of you or your ancestor, there's a little feature where you can record. You don't have to write on there who this is and when it was taken and where it was taken. You can record your voice and you can say, this picture was taken around 1925. It's my grandfather, so-and-so, standing with his best friend, so-and-so, in front of this house. And so it does a couple of things. It tells what's in the picture, but it records your voice for your descendants. So Family Search, the LeSueur Family Organization has chosen Family Search as the official place to document our family history because it's so non-perishable. It's the most non-perishable place we've found to do it, and we'll preserve it. And it's also so public, so accessible. It allows people all over the world to access it if they're related.
And it's free.
And it's free. So it's really a great place. If you haven't started recording your memories and your story on Family Search, even though that part is private now, start doing it.
We're going to hand the microphone back to Adele for a couple of announcements, and then that will conclude our mini presentations, and then you'll be free to just visit away for a little while, and we'll get the mic back to Carl. I want to mention just a couple of quick items about the LeSueur Family Organization. One is that we're anxious to get some wonderful women on the executive committee, and we're working to do that. Mike also mentioned we would love to have our committees be multi-generational. We're not social media savvy. Sometimes the best way to get information out are through means we're not capable in, and we're grateful for the younger generations who will convey information much more effectively to their peers and their cousins than we're able to. So you ought to see the LFO changing significantly over the next couple of years. I'll turn the microphone over to Adele now.
So when my husband and I were first married, well, we've been married a while, they had the first multi-generational LeSueur reunion that we were aware of, and we went to it. And I can remember sitting at the same table with Dave and Nancy and meeting them and meeting Carl and enjoying that reunion. And when we had the next one, being invited to help participate in the next reunion that we had at the Kimball Stake Center, and what a great experience that was for us. And so as Dave has asked and invited those who are interested, who would like to serve on a committee and be a part of this, it's really a wonderful experience to get to know family members that you would not know otherwise. We have a few activities that we have thought about, that we are planning for the future. We would like to have a reunion for Generation 4 and 5. We originally thought the spring of 22, and now thinking maybe later on in the year of 22. Also, a possible trip to the Channel Islands. I don't know how many of you have been there. We have not. We had a trip planned for last October to attend, but that could really be a great experience to go with those who have been there before in 2023, perhaps. That's another activity that we have thought about doing in the future. So to Jersey. Okay, Jersey Isles. And so those are just a few activities, and like I say, would really love to invite those who would like to get on the committees, and it's really can be a blessing.
Let's have a show of hands. How many people have been to Jersey Isle? Okay, there's several. Very good. By the way, of course, the French pronunciation is LeSueur. The Norman French, Jerry language, they say LeSueur. And of course, in America now we've got to LeSueur. Anyway, I was going to introduce myself now. We have time. At first, we were trying to go by all the sites. I didn't have time to introduce myself. But so I'm Carl W. LeSueur. I'm one of the younger sons of the youngest son of the second wife of the younger son of John and Caroline LeSueur, the original LeSueur that joined the church.
Is this going to be a quiz?
No, I'm just letting you know that's how you have to. That's how come I'm on the next to the last page of Don LeSueur's LeSueur book is because of that. Now it's interesting. We've got a lot of family names that are the same. Now, John and Caroline LeGrady LeSueur in Jersey had two boys who died at a young age. One was named Sean, the French version of John, and they had a daughter, and they had, of course, a son, John, and then they had a daughter, Caroline, and they had another daughter who was Jane Caroline. And so they actually had, of their 6 children, they had 2 Johns and 2 Carolines, if you count middle names in the French version. And then they had the 6 kids. There's 2 boys and 4 girls. So those 6 kids, each of them had a child named John and a child named Caroline. Except for John T, he didn't have a Caroline. But the 6 kids had 6 John LeSueurs and 5 Carolines. So that was kind of a real common name. And then today, as you know, we've got quite a few Johns, not Carolines, but John. So anyway, and a lot of other common names today. They mentioned Day LeSueur, so we have David E here on the bus. David B is not. David C's widow's on the bus with us. Mary, who has a son named Carl B on the bus with us. I'm Carl W. My mom was named Mary. My uncle Carl Gordon LeSueur's wife was named Mary. We've got Leo Mike LeSueur. He's the third of 4 Leos in a row. We've got and some of them go by different names, but we've got a lot of common names today. So we put on their name tags the middle initial of some of those that have the same name. William F. had a son named William C. who went by Will. Of course, we got Bill LeSueur on the bus with us today. He's a William. We got some other, quite a few Williams. Anyway, a lot of family names. Pardon me? Oh, James. Yeah, a lot of James LeSueurs. It's interesting, when my wife and I had children, we went through Don LeSueur's book, and we chose for our 3 children a name that there was no LeSueurs by that name in Don's book.
Ignacio.
And I was going to say, so now some of you, go ahead, Jenna.
Ask if they need more name tags.
Oh, does anyone need another names tag sheet from Jenna that's a directory for the tour? Everybody, yeah, it looks like Lavona needs one.
A name tag?
No, this.
Yeah, we got one.
The sheets there, yeah.
What generation is Lavona?
What's that?
Ask Lavona what generation she is. She's a
5.
I think she's a 6.
Lavona, what generation are you on there? No, you would. They don't have
John and Caroline.
John and Caroline, the first generation on there. So you're one more than what you have on your name tag. So you'd probably be a 5. Yeah, as far as I know, there's only 7 of us Generation 4s left. William F's son John P. LeSueur had Bill and Marlon, and then my brother Wayne and I, and then our first cousins Brandon, Lyndon, and Glendon LeSueur from California. So I think there's just 7 from our Generation 4 are still left.
Patricia. In California, Patricia.
So anyway, that's the I think for the introductions. Would love to get to know everybody as we go along, but we're going to give you a little time here to visit for a while and relax.
Yes, thank you. I don't know. Stephen, did you get one of these?
No. So thank you.
Where does this need to go?
So I've got the phone. I've got the mom on my roster. He needs to.
Or want to turn it off.
There's 3 of us back here that do.
Okay. 3 of them though, black LeSueurs that either married into the family or maybe there was a LeSueur someplace. Not our relatives, but some other LeSueur from France who had the plantation owner and had slaves or something. But none of that is in our family. But there are some black LeSueurs, and I got a story about that. My dad's brother, Gordon LeSueur, was in the Army in World War II. And they were out in the middle of nowhere on Borneo when the United States was retaking the islands from the Japanese, and they were over there on Borneo in the Army. In the middle of the jungle, out in the middle of nowhere, he meets a guy and says, hi, and Carl Gordon, we went by Carl in the Army. He says, hi, what's your name? He meets this black fellow, and he says, my name is Carl LeSueur. And my uncle goes, well, I'm Carl LeSueur. There they were in 1943 or whatever it was, 44 or 43, whatever, out in the middle of the jungle in Borneo. That's how they met. Yes, yeah.
There you go.
All right.
There's 2 coming around.
You know, there's some snacks coming around in some bags for you to take what you want.
Someone could walk up and down the aisle, that's okay.
You're okay to walk up and down the aisle if you need to use the restroom or pass out the snacks or whatever.
Change seats or go see your neighbor or your cousin.
Yeah. Bill LeSueur wanted me to mention the LeSueurs in basketball. It's kind of been a family sport over the years. I played basketball at BYU on the intramural team and all with David C. LeSueur and actually Keith LeSueur and Steve LeSueur, and then when I moved back,
And Fred.
and Fred LeSueur, my younger brother, and then when I moved back to Mesa in the 80s, we had a team joined the City League. We had all the players on the team were last name of LeSueur. In fact, we didn't have a big following, but all of our fans were LeSueurs. Our biggest fans were, well, actually, Waldo was our coach, and his sisters, Rowene and Oma, were our biggest vocal fans. And anyway, we played in our league. We were undefeated and were city champions of Mesa. Oh. Yeah. They give us a huge trophy that Don's been keeping for years and years. He wants to get rid of it if you want it. Yeah. Oh. Oh, there we go. Nina had it at her house and then gave it to Don.
I'm going to hold it up here.
Take a picture of it, put it on Family Search, then you can throw it away.
Oh, I got it.
You okay? Is that video or audio? That you're doing?
So we just got to Heber and turned here on the highway to Snowflake. We'll be there in another 25 minutes or so. And on my little sheet I had us going into Snowflake for a little bit. We're going to, in the interest of time, forget that, and you can look those things up on the internet later. We'll just keep going on through Snowflake to Concho. But I thought I'd start back at the beginning of our family in John LeSueur and Caroline LeGreely, who were married and lived on Jersey Isle. And like I say, they had a couple of boys early on. They had a boy and a girl and a boy, and the first boy died young, and the next boy got sick and died when he was 5 or so. Their second daughter, Jane, got the same kind of sickness. But by then, John LeSueur was an elder in the church and blessed her, and she lived, but she still had some lingering effects. Her eyes were a little crossed, and you may know see some pictures of Jane LeSueur Davis. She wasn't able to thread a needle or sew or things like that, but she was a great woman who seemed to be particularly close to her mother and the rest of the family. But so over in Channel Islands and on Jersey Isle, joining the church was really the story of the LeGreely family. 4 LeGrelys and their 4 spouses joined the church. One of the spouses was John LeSueur, but the first one to join was Caroline's brother Francis. He joined. I think he was like the 10th person baptized in Jersey. But a year or two later, then his 2 sisters, Caroline and Mary, joined, and their husbands. And in 1849, in 1851, Mary LeGreely and her husband John Duhamel decided they were going to emigrate to America. They had the funds, and they signed up for the tour. And they were getting ready to go. They were all ready to go, and John Newton Hamill died. Mary decided to continue anyway, and they went, and she had a couple of kids, and there was another guy on the tour who was in their ward, Philip Merritt, on the trip, and when they got to St. Louis, and they knew each other from Jersey, they got to St. Louis, and this Philip Merritt and Mary LeGrady got married. And then they stayed there a little bit, and then went on into to Salt Lake. What's that?
Here's 277 and a half a mile.
You keep going straight.
Yeah. Okay. And so that family, just keep going to Snowflake. 277. And then, so that family stayed close to the other family. I'm sure they rode back and forth, but so 4 years later, I believe it was 1851, it may have been 52 that they emigrated, but 4 years later, finally, Caroline, Uncle John LeGrady got baptized. Well, not 4 years later, a couple years later. Then his wife, Eliza, got baptized a year after him. And that changed the ball game, because John and Caroline LeSueur kind of lived in a series of rental houses in the capital city of St. Helier, and didn't have enough money to make the trip. But now this Uncle John and Aunt Eliza, they had some savings. They had a farm, and they sold their farm and donated to the church's perpetual immigration fund. So the LeSueurs and the LeGrady, John LeGrady and all, they all came, and a whole bunch of members of the church on Jersey Isle got a group together, and they all came over, and I think most of them came as perpetual immigration fund people. There's some independents that also came, but backtracking a little bit on that. So when they got baptized in 1849, John and Caroline, they were baptized by William C. Dunbar, who baptized them. John Taylor was in Salt Lake City, and he was called later on that fall to open a mission in France. And he came over in 1850, and he passed by, stopped in Jersey for a couple of times, and the people in Jersey were mostly bilingual, so he used some of the bilingual saints there to help him with opening the mission in France. He didn't speak French at the time, but he learned French. Eliza was one of those who didn't know English. She only spoke French. It was interesting. John Taylor had the Book of Mormon published in French, and Eliza got baptized soon afterwards. I don't know. I wonder if she finally got the Book of Mormon in French, or if that had anything to do with it. But anyway, when they joined and they helped to finance everyone to come over in 1855, they got on a boat and went to Liverpool, kind of a roundabout by Ireland and all. They had some storms or whatever they went around, but they got to Liverpool. They joined a much bigger group of saints from England and all over on the Chimborazo sailing ship, and they came over to the United States. They passed New York City. New York City still, they were building a new immigration center at the lower tip of Manhattan Island called Castle Garden, but it was still a few months away from being open. So they told the pilot ship that came out, no, we're going on to Philadelphia, and they went down to Philadelphia. Now the church did have people that they usually sent people around to New Orleans and then up the river to St. Louis. But there was so much malaria and sickness on the Mississippi River. In 1855, this is the first year, they said, "Nah, we're going to start doing East Coast cities and avoid New Orleans." And so they came to Philadelphia, right there, you know, the docks, the river comes from the ocean, comes up the river right there at Philadelphia, Independence Hall, and everything is right there. They were there a day or two, and they, on the way coming in the harbor, by the way, they had the people on ship, they had material, the church did, and they had people sailing sewing the covers for the covered wagons that they would have later. So they were sewing their covered wagon covers as they were coming into Philadelphia. While they were there, the LeSueurs had their 4 daughters and their son John T., who was 2, and the youngest girl was Harriet, who was 5, and she got separated from the group somehow there in Philadelphia, and they were frantic. And they found her at the police station eating ice cream for the first time in her life. So the church put the whole group on a train going across Pennsylvania from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. And the LeSueurs were fortunate because just the year before, that train had just opened up. Before that, my mom's family, who came from the Delaware area and all the Mormon missionaries going back and forth, they went by canal boats to the Allegheny Mountains, and then they had a series of going over the mountains where they had a steam engine pull the train up the mountain, and they go for a while flat, and then they come to another place where the steam engines at the top, the stationary steam engines at the top, and then pull up this pulley and pull the train to the top, and they had 5 steps on each side. It was quite a dangerous and tough way to go. I was just there last month, and they had a sign in the visitor center there at this Allegheny Portage Railroad Museum. They had quotes from some of the early travelers. They had a quote from Wilford Woodruff, who had going on missions, and he said that was one of the most dangerous parts he ever traveled through, was that going over the mountains on those Alleghenies with those steam engines pulling trains up, stationary engines. So anyway, by 1854, they had locomotives that were powerful enough to pull trains over the mountains. And so the LeSueurs got there just in time. The next year, they had a steam engine that he went all the way from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is where then they got on ships to go down the Ohio River to the Mississippi, and then up the Mississippi River to St. Louis. And then in St. Louis, it was still a place where the Mormons gathered a little bit, and they stopped and resupplied a few things. In St. Louis, the leader of their group, a former French mission president after John Taylor, was I believe his first name was Charles Lamoureux. He died there. He was bringing with him 2 nieces and a nephew from Scotland to Utah. They were orphans, but they were in their late teens, early 20s, and so they were going to come live with the Lamoureux. And so before he died, he asked John LeSueur to make sure they got to his wife, his widow. And so they did, but then, like I said, they were pretty old at the time, but this John LeSueur made sure they got there. Their name was Hardy. They were a Hardy family, but they stayed with the Lamoureux, their aunt. Anyway, they're in So they got on the ship in St. Louis up the Missouri River to Atchison, Kansas. In Atchison, Kansas, there was where they got off, and that year, for the first time, the church had opened a new kind of immigration spot there at Mormon Grove. I've been there. I think a few others have been there. It's on the prairie, 7 miles east of civilization, really. And there is where they got their got split up into companies. We got the LeSueur got assigned with the Charles Harper Company. They were all those in the Provincial Immigration Fund, where you had to pay part of your way, but you had to pay the rest of your way once you got to Salt Lake. You're supposed to pay back into the fund and pay it back. But that's where they got their oxen and their wagons, and then they put the covers on the wagons they had sold on the boat, and they took off and went across the plains. And there were several companies that year in 1855, and they stayed pretty close to the one in front of them. They had some dealings with the Native Americans that looked like they could be hostile. Different tribes. The other ones I think they did some trading with. You can find this online on Family Search. Or the church has a site, Overland Travel, the LDS Church. Go on there, and Charles Harper and people in his company have described this in great detail. So they got to Salt Lake City in October, and they had an early snow. They were camped on the ground where West High School is now, where people then were going to be farmed out to different families or places, or find a place to live. But you know the famous 1848 cricket infestation in Salt Lake? Well, a few different times afterwards they had grasshopper infestations. In 1855 was the worst grasshopper infestation. And Utah was struggling. They didn't have very good crops, and they didn't have much food, and the people were poor. And LeSueur's couldn't find a place to live for a couple of weeks until, and it's like I say, it snowed while they were camped out there, and this John McGreeley, who had financed the operation, their uncle, died. So he made it to Salt Lake, but died right when they got there. So he's buried in Salt Lake, and he's the one we put a new monument on his grave there. Well, finally, the LeSueurs had known a missionary in Jersey, John Pack. He lived there in Salt Lake, but he had a farm north of town, a few miles in West Bountiful, actually. It was the Bountiful area. The Sessions settlement was right there. They called things different names, but right there in West Bountiful. I've been to the location. It's right where there's an elementary school there now. But he had a wooden house, a small wooden house on his farm. LeSueur spent the first winter there, and it was a cold winter, and they didn't have much food. And Jane LeSueur Davis, she described being very hungry that winter. So they began to, they stayed there another year. They bought a place of their own and began to do well. And then Johnston's army came along. President Van Buren had got reports that Brigham Young, the prophet and governor of the Utah Territory, was being rebellious, and so, which was not true. I mean, we had sent James Casto and the rest of them in the Mormon Battalion to help with the Mexican war and all. at the same time they came out to Utah. But anyway, they thought it was a rebellion, so they sent out an army. Half of the United States Army came out to Utah, is what I've read. Is that correct there, Steve? About half the army?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
The army wasn't very big.
No, it was a small army, but...
Was it 2,500?
Yeah, so the United States Army was 5,000 men, and they sent 2,500 to Utah. And so Brigham Young was trying to decide what to do, and so they decided, well, we don't want to, we're trying to negotiate something, and they said, well, we're going to stop them from coming into Utah through the mountain passes. And so when the Army got to Fort Bridger, they got Lot Smith and other people to harass the Army, run off their horses, steal their cattle. The Mormons had a settlement there called Fort Supply. That they burned their fort and their crops so the Army could not use them. They built fortifications in Echo Canyon, and they kept the Army out until they negotiated. And then all winter long, the Army had to stay there in Fort Bridger. Then finally, by the spring, they had negotiated that the Army said, okay, we won't stay in Salt Lake. We'll march on through town and we'll settle south. So it's just west of Utah Lake, about now, 40 miles away. So, by the way, I have a disclaimer. I'm doing this by memory, so some of my exact dates, mileage, and things might be a little off. But anyway, Brigham Young decided he wasn't sure he could trust the Army, and so he evacuated Salt Lake City and the settlements to the north, including Bountiful, had them all move down out of Salt Lake Valley into Utah Valley. He left a few people there to burn everything, so the Army couldn't get it if they went back on their word. And so the LeSueurs went down to Springville and lived there, and there was a whole bunch of them in the same house and all. And the Army kept their word and went through town and started to build a fort out in the west part of Utah Valley. Now, Brigham Young still wanted to have good relations with the Army, and he approved of everything, but a lot of the Mormons helped build Camp Floyd, including William F. including John LeSueur, their father, including John LeSueur and Philip Merritt, Mary LeGrady's second husband. They helped build this Camp Floyd for the Army, and a lot of the Mormons did, and supplied them with food and all that. It was good wages and good money. And so when most of the Mormons started going back to their homes 2 or 3 months later on that summer and fall, LeSueur stayed there another year.
Carl?
Yeah.
So then, could we say that the Lord sent Johnston's army out, so the Lord sent Johnston's army out so that the LeSueurs could survive and have good wages? Is that what you're telling us?
That might be reading a little bit into it, but that's what happened. So now, the oldest daughter, Mary LeSueur, had married James Fackrell as a plural wife, and and they moved back to Bountiful right after, and they found a farm for the family and convinced them the next year, 1859, to move back to Bountiful and buy this farm, and they did that. And John LeSueur was a good farmer, and Caroline, they worked together and were starting to prosper and do real well. And John LeSueur got sick in 1862 and died at the age of 49. And by that time, his second daughter, Jane LeSueur, married John Davis, and they were some of the early settlers in Idaho, in Montpelier, Idaho. They weren't the very first, but they're the next group. And they were up there, and they convinced the rest of the family not marry Jane Fackrell. She always stayed in Bountiful in northern Utah the rest of her life, but the rest of the family, she had them move to Montpelier, and they lived in the 2-room log cabin together. Jane and her husband and a first child or so, and then the other room was Caroline with her children, Caroline and Harriet and John T. and William. And John T., I believe, wrote that, boy, that as far as financially, that was, I mean, they did it for family reasons, to be by family, but financially, they said they were really prospering, and soon that farm would have been worth a whole lot that they'd left in Bountiful, and they went to another start over from scratch situation in Montpelier. But that's where the other two daughters married, and eventually the two sons got married. They grew up and married there in Montpelier, Idaho. When they did sell the farm, by the way, the one who they didn't do a lot of cash things in those days, so the one who bought it says, I'll give you so much wheat for 5 years. I'll deposit wheat in the Salt Lake Bishop Storehouse tithing office, and you can withdraw it from the Logan, Utah tithing office, which was the nearest place. And so they did that, and they had someone for I think a third share of the wheat would go and get it for him. And finally, the last year, John T. and William F. went and got it themselves, and that's when they ran into Brigham Young and saw John Taylor and the mountains there coming through Logan Canyon on the way back to Montpelier. So anyway, so now we got them in Montpelier, Idaho, and let me just pause here a minute to show you. This is Snowflake we're coming to. The Snowflake Temple will be up here on the hill on the right. Have you come there yet?
Yeah, we passed it.
Oh, we passed it? Okay. Sorry, I was talking though. Yeah, we just passed on the right. All these small towns, of course, wanted a temple built there eventually. They all wanted one, and finally, Thatcher and Snowflake and Mesa and different ones got one. St. John's is the only one that hasn't yet. This stoplight's the main street. I was gonna, if we had time, but we don't, so we're gonna keep on going straight through here, Curly. Just go straight on through. Anyway, on the right here, a couple blocks away, is the main stake center in Snowflake. And the earliest settlements in northern Arizona were in 1876. They started 4 settlements north of here on the lower Little Colorado River. And they had trouble with Little Colorado River. It doesn't look like much today, but it flooded out the dams every year or two, and it was just real hard. And they were trying to live the United Order, and they had some problems there. And anyway, eventually they broke up. But one of them that left there was this William Flake, and he came down here, and the man who had the big ranch here, James Stinson, non-LDS, he arranged with Flake for so many head of church tithing cattle. The church had a big tithing herd in northern Arizona between St. George and Fredonia, up there in northwestern. And they get a bunch of cattle, and they have a big herd. They bought all this land here, and then gave it out to the Mormons that were coming here from those lower Colorado settlements and other areas. He did that, and then when William Flake ran into Erastus Snow. He was one of the apostles that was over church settlement in northeastern Arizona, And he told him what he'd done, and the rest of Snow says, great. And then he said, I'll come down and lay out the streets and plat for the city, and we'll get it organized. What should we call it? And so they ended up deciding, well, why don't we name, I think somebody said, well, let's name it after you two, or one of them decided that, maybe Erastus Snow did, so they called it Snowflake, after Erastus Snow and William Flake. William Jordan Flake was his full name, but anyway, so that's why we got Snowflake. But in there, there was a house built by a man named Ralph Ramsey. Ralph Ramsey was a carpenter in Salt Lake City, and he was the one who carved the beehive gate for Brigham Young. Originally it was wooden. Now we have a metal one there that's still up there in Salt Lake City, that next to his Brigham Young's lion house that went up to his farm up that area, the gate into his farm area. That was carved by Ralph Ramsey. He also did carpentry work in the lion house and the beehive house for Brigham Young. Well, he eventually came to Arizona and settled, and in 1888, 9 and all, he built John T. LeSueur's nice big brick home, the nicest home in St. John's. Ralph Ramsey was the one who built that, and John T. moved in there in 1890. But then he moved back. He'd lived earlier in Snowflake. He moved back to Snowflake and built a house for William Flake's son, James Flake. And it's standing there now, another beautiful brick home. And so Snowflake has put a monument to Snow and Flake there by their stake center. They have got the old Stinson Ranch House as a museum, and this James M. Flake House as a museum. But you can look all that up on the internet, or go back there some other time and look at it.
41 miles from St.
So anyway, that's the Snowflake deal. But okay, so I got the LeSueurs into Montpelier, where the 4 younger children got married. Caroline Mallory got married right away, and then eventually Harriet and Warner and John and William. Now, while they were there, that's around the Oregon Trail, and Caroline LeGreely had a storefront in front of their home in their houses there in St. Helier's, and they brought up the trail. They lived around the Oregon Trail, and she sold produce and all to the travelers along the Oregon Trail, and the boys helped her. And so she was at a store, kind of a store owner, and from the first. And John T. and William F., they started off being kind of farmers and cattlemen and all, but they both eventually got into being store managers like their mother. Now, the Casto family had lived in Montpelier and had moved away, but one of the older brothers moved back to Montpelier. His father passed away, and he eventually brought a couple of his sisters over to live with him and brought them back to Montpelier. And so while the mom remarried and lived in Wyoming, but some of the kids, the married brother and some of the 2 or 3 of his younger sisters lived there in Montpelier, moved back to Montpelier. And John T., if you read his story, he's real grateful that happened, and that's how he met Geneva Casto, and they got married. Now, William F. LeSueur, he liked one of the blacksmith's daughters, the Bingham's daughters, and but the one he kind of was at first interested, she got married, and then then he got interested in the next sister, in Anna Marie Bingham, and he tells there, it's in Don LeSueur's book, about how he's walking down the street thinking about going and asking her to a dance. And David's kind of getting wet feet and decided not to or whatever. And then he runs into her. So she's coming over to, she's walking over to this other Bingham house to visit her sisters and all. And anyway, he runs into her and asks her to the dance. And that's how they met. They got married shortly before the whole family moved to Arizona. But before that, the Caroline LeSueur Mallory, she and her husband had moved to Provo. But when they got and the first Mesa Pine, Lehigh had been settled in 1877. When they were doing the first Mesa Company in 1878, they had they'd had these men in Montpelier organize the company and get people to come with them. And when they came through Utah, the Mallory decided to join them and go and they joined them, and they came down first to Mesa. They came down through Kanab. Actually, the road is a little bit east of Kanab, and they came down the canyon there, down the Pariah Canyon to Lee's Ferry, where they crossed over. That was being run by John D. Lee and his wife. And then they came up a steep hill on the other side. Wilford Woodruff said that was the worst piece of wagon trail he's ever been on in his life. And then they came down through the Navajo Reservation and to the Little Colorado River, and then came up where those 4 early settlements were on the Colorado River. And then they came south. They came down through Camp Verde, down over the rim, and into town. And Mesa had not been filed on because no one knew they could get water up there. Lehigh was down below the Mesa. They were able to irrigate down below there, but they kind of didn't say anything. They went down the river and they crossed the river and then staked the claim. But these 4 men came first, and then the rest of the company came right behind them. And they started digging the old Hohokam Indian canals. The Hohokams had disappeared 400 years earlier, but they had a great civilization in the valley and had a very sophisticated, extensive canal system. The Pimas, who were still living there, referred to them as those who have gone. Those who have gone translated as Hohokam. And so they started digging out these canals by hand, shovel, and they were in a camp down below the mesa trying to get the water. The canals dug, and Caroline gave birth to her 7th child. And they had complications, and there was a heat wave going on. They were living in just little stick brush shanties. They put a tent over theirs to keep the sun off a little bit, but it was still bad. And Caroline died there soon after childbirth. The child lived, and for a little bit. There was a family living that came a little bit after that first group, the Perkins family. And they had known the Perkins family in Bountiful, Caroline had. And in fact, this Brother Perkins there, he was later called as the first presiding elder in the Mesa area. But he had baptized John T. LeSueur in Bountiful years earlier. But anyway, so they had some connection, so they asked him and his wife, he had 2 wives, to see if they could nurse the baby and get the baby through it. And they tried, but the baby died a month later. And the mother and baby are both buried there in that camp, somewhere about where Val Vista Road would connect with the 202 freeway and Lehigh Road in there. It used to be underneath a lone pine tree, and John T. LeSueur knew where it was, and he was going to get it marked, but he wasn't able to. And then anyway, it never got marked. We don't know. It's an unknown grave today. When the freeway was built, I asked a man named Freeman, I think, who owns the land right there, and he said, "Hey, if they ever find a grave as they build the freeway, let me know." And that was sure. Anyway, we never heard. He never heard of it. So her grave is there. They eventually got the water up onto the mesa. I was gonna say, but before Caroline LeSueur Mallory died, she had written back to her family and said, "This is great down here, great weather, it's got great prospects. Please come join me." And anyway, the family decided to do that the next year, and they came down in the second group of Mesa pioneers. But in the meantime, they got the water up on the mesa that fall of '78 and early '79. Charles Mallory there and built that first adobe home in that corner that we showed you. He kept his family together, and even when the grandma and all the aunts and uncles came down, he kept his family together. That the whole family kind of helped out and helped the kids and did that kind of thing, but he wanted to keep them together, and they did. So when the rest of the LeSueur extended family came down the next year, they came down on the mountain range on the east side of the Wasatches there. They came down through Camas an area and all, and when they got to about where Salt Lake is, they cut across the mountain. Some of them did, including William F. and John T. and their wives, and went over to the endowment house. So this was 1878, the fall of '78. The Salt Lake Temple was started in 1853 and took 40 years until 1893 to be completed. In the meantime, for quite a while, they did temple work and ceilings in this endowment house, which was where the North Visitor Center was on Temple Square. So that's where John T., William F., and their spouses got sealed, and then they went back and joined the rest of the group. The rest of the group had by then come through Provo Canyon and got into Utah Valley, crossed the Wasatches there, and when they joined up with them. So Anna Marie was only 17 years old, 17 and a half, 18, whatever, and William F. was 3.5 years older, but so she was going down. Her parents were coming, and her older brother and her two sisters who were married, they were plural wives of Hiram Phelps. They were all coming down, but they came back there to Utah Valley and found out that her parents and her older brother were going to stay there for a while with other family and friends, which really disappointed Anna Marie, but knowing her other two older sisters were coming, they came on down the same route basically as the first group, came down there, and then they got that lot right there from Charles Mallory. I'm not sure how the acquisition worked, but they built their house right there and lived with their mother in the same house. At that time, John T. and Geneva had the one son, James W., and that's when William F. and Anna Marie's first child was born, William C. Will. Anyway, that first summer was a real hot, dry one, and the LeSueurs decided we want something a little cooler than this. And one of their, according to William F. LeSueur, the Davises have maybe a little different version, but William F. Said we had some friends from Montpelier, Idaho that had settled in Colorado. So the Mormons had settlements all around the Four Corners area. And one of their friends was settled in Manassas, Colorado. And it sounded great, so they decided the whole group of LeSueurs were gonna move to there. They had only been in Mesa 15 months. Actually, Mallory's, Charles Mallory stayed there another year, but the rest of them came and they got to the fork of the road there at Winslow, the Brigham City, and then they started towards Holbrook. They got to Holbrook, and they had to be paused because the Apaches were on the warpath. And while they were there, they say church leaders called them to settle a new settlement in St. John's. And I don't know how formal or who those leaders were. It was April 1st, and the apostles in the area were headed back to General Conference by then. So I don't know exactly how that happened, but they were called to join there. There had been 50 families that were settled there in St. John's. It's actually just south of St. John's, a little community called Salem. 50 families there in the fall of 1879, and the LeSueurs joined them in the spring of 1880. And then later on, the church sent David King Udall to be the first bishop the next fall of 1880, and they called, I believe it was 300 families. A couple years later, they called another 250 families to come down. But anyway, let me tell you a story about how the Apache warpath. What's that? To Concho. You want to look that up for him?
See, my phone's being used.
So we'll go through Concho?
Yeah. You want to look it up on your phone? Derek, you tell pretty how far?
It's not working right now.
Oh, don't have
there's no internet.
It's just not very far.
We should be there at 20 after, but
20 after?
What time is it now?
10:33.
So an hour?
Oh, 53.
53, so about
30 minutes, 30.
No, yeah, I'd say less than a half hour. I don't know. I can't remember.
Maybe like 25 minutes from what they're saying.
Yeah.
Is it St. John or Concho?
It's a Concho. Then St. John's is only 15 minutes past Concho.
well,
Or actually, St. John's is 25 minutes.
25 minutes.
St. John's is about a half an hour.
Okay. Yeah, I'm forgetting all the times now, but okay. So everybody here has Arizona roots. Most of us are still living here, but here's the reason why we're Arizonans and not Coloradans. So Springerville was a new town. Their first settler there was Springer. He only was there a year. Then later on, the Becker brothers came, and Gustav Becker had the mercantile store there. The nearest railroad was over in New Mexico, and they had to buy their supplies from the store in New Mexico and have it shipped by wagon over. So every once in a while, he would get on his horse, get his money in his saddlebags, and get on his horse and ride over to New Mexico, over towards, depending on how far the railroad was over to Midland or towards New Albuquerque, and buy new supplies and have them shipped over by wagon load. But of course, this area at Springerville was right in no man's land between the Apaches on the south and the Navajos on the north. And so in between was kind of a lawless area that attracted a lot of outlaws, including the Clanton gang after the shootout in Tombstone at the OK Corral. They lived up there, and there was others. There was the Smith gang, and there's different ones that lived in the area. So of course they would love to see when Gustav Becker was going with his money bag full of money over to New Mexico and ambush him and all. So he never announced it. Just in the middle of the night, he'd jump on his horse and take out of town. And it's 16 miles from the New Mexico border. A little bit further on, you come to the settlement of Quemado. It was a small Mexican-American community at the time, but Victorio was the Apache chief in this area. Further south was Geronimo and Cochise were further south in Arizona, but Victorio was on the warpath. Anyway, Becker was there for the night. He's getting ready to go in the morning, and he's noticed on the ridge right above where he was a string of Apaches going right on top of the ridge right above him. And so he held his horse's nose to not whinny, and they went on by and didn't see him. But he was going kind of the same route. Well, anyway, he went to Quemado, was his next stop as he rode into Hot. And what had happened is Victorio and his warriors had got to Quemado just as this early light and had slaughtered every man, woman, child, and baby in town and set it on fire and burned the whole thing down. And so when Gustav Becker got there, that's all he saw. But he was the one who wrote about this and how we got the story on that. Now Victoria did, was on the warpath for other things, but that was that town. And so later on it was resettled, and they just named the town Quemado, which is in Spanish burned up or burned up, because they resettled it back where the original community was. Anyway, because of Victorio, the Apache chief, the LeSueur stayed in Arizona.
Well, you didn't get to the part of the LeSueurs. How are they connected to this?
The main reason, of course, is so the LeSueurs were in Holbrook, and they were stopped there waiting for, because the road was not safe, because the LeSueurs had to go over to New Mexico, just north of Quemado, and then up to Colorado. And so the road was closed. They said, you can't travel there, the Victoria's on the warpath. And so they were paused there while the road was closed, and that's when the church leaders called them. So the real reason they stayed in Arizona after Victoria was done, the reason they stayed there is because they were called by church leaders. But Victoria had a part there that making them pause there for a while. So
when you hold the mic, try to put it in a little bit more.
Okay, like.
Yeah, like that.
Does it sound like you?
Well, it's sounding just fine, but you're moving above your mouth a little bit and then down a little bit.
Oh, it's very okay.
Yeah, so you aim it so that your voice is going right into the speaker. You'll probably.
Like that. Okay.
That might help a little bit.
Like that.
Yeah.
Are you ready to take over? You want me to do a little bit more? Or?
Do you have any more about the LeSueurs?
Yeah, the LeSueurs in St. John's and stuff?
Yeah.
Want me to talk a little bit about that then? Okay.
I'll do St. John's and then we'll get back to you for the saints in St. John's. Finding the LeSueurs in St. John's.
Okay. Spencer? How many minutes to Concho in St. John's? Can you look it up for us?
Yeah, we could hear you the entire time, just so you know. But there's just one point where you put it up.
Oh, okay.
But I think it'll be a little bit louder.
Okay.
Which you're just a little, like, we can hear you just fine, but you'll be a little bit louder, I think, if you get it right in there.
Okay.
How many?
27.
27 to St. John's.
Oh, now it says 21.
To St. John's?
Yeah.
How many more minutes to St. John's?
They said 20 minutes.
So Concho's in 5 then.
Concho's in 4.5 miles.
Okay. I'll give the turn when he leaves Concho.
Sure.
7 minutes.
Okay, so we're coming up to Concho, and this is where.
So hold it just below your mouth. You have it above your mouth.
Okay. How's that? Is that good?
Yep.
Is that better? Okay. So I'm holding the microphone just below my mouth. It's supposed to be better, so for future speakers. Yeah, that's better. That's sounding better. What was I doing? Okay, so Christopher Kemp, K-E-M-P-E, was a polygamist. He had his first family lived in St. John's, and his second family lived 15 miles to the west in Concho, which we're coming over the hill to. And in that second family was his daughter Jenny Kemp, who will hear the story about how she became sealed to Frank LeSueur. But so this was earlier on. It was a Mexican-American community. In fact, they were actually Basques from the region between Spain and France, the Basque country, and they had sheep, big thousands of sheep herds, thousands of sheep in a herd. You know, just lots of sheep out here. But anyway, the Mormons also settled out here next to them, and they called their town Erastus, I assume after Erastus Snow, the apostle, and they have a little cemetery here, Erastus Cemetery, and that's where this Christopher Kemp, the father, and Jenny Kemp, the daughter, are buried. But eventually the two communities kind of merged, and after a while just called it all Concho. They didn't say Erastus and Concho. They called it all Concho. Now, up in this area, this is about as green as I've seen it here. They've had lots of rain last month and really green the place up. You usually look out here and go like, what would the sheep eat? But you can see it now and say, yeah, there is quite a bit. So I guess it's about time to turn it over to Steve. I'm not sure exactly. Christopher Kemp had a mercantile little store here. What he did, but it was they were all members of the St. John's stake. So the stake center and the government headquarters and everything, and all was in St. John's, and so they would come into church and the shop and all that. So people out here in the surrounding communities of Springerville and Greer and all, they knew the people in the stake there in St. John's, and so the Kemps would come into town for like the dances and stuff, and that's where Frank and Jenny met in a town dance. But here's
left or right?
We go left. Not yet. Right. Oh, we go right and then left. I'm not watching you. Right, and then we'll go to the left. We're just kind of jog here for a little bit. Jog for a half mile. And so I don't know what standing that might have been from the old days here in Concho. Yeah, here you turn left in a half mile.
How far is Eager from St. John?
30 minutes. So it's 15 now to St. John's, and then after we do the ambush site, it'll be 30 minutes to Springerville.
How far is it from Eager to Phoenix?
3.5 hours, 3 hours and 45 minutes, 3.5. I think we might just barely squeeze in there in time.
Straight?
Left.
Left.
No. We're going to go to the road, there's another road that goes back through Sholo about 30 miles south of here.
Is there anything coming on? I've got a blind spot here on the left.
You're okay.
No,
Good. Yeah.
nothing coming. Here we go.
And how far?
15 minutes to St. John's.
9.5 miles.
Oh, 10 minutes. Okay.
15 minutes.
Okay, now we're coming into St. John's in a few minutes, but we'll have Steve LeSueur, who is writing a book on this whole Frank LeSueur ambush. And he'll start telling us a little bit about that story here. Also, he's also in his book, he covers in good detail the settling of St. John's and all that. So whatever Steve wants to do, we'll turn the microphone over to him.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Is that? Am I got this?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Good. All right. Well, first of all, I am enthusiastic. I'm feeling it. So right now, I'm not going to talk about the specific events leading up to the murder, but just a little bit about what St. John's was like, the setting. So when the Saints were called to settle here, as Frank said, starting in 1879, and the LeSueurs arriving in 1880. St. John's was already an established town from the mid-1870s. It was called San Juan, and it had been settled by some Mexican Americans. They were actually Mexicans, born in Mexico, and then when the United States acquired Arizona, New Mexico, they became Mexican Americans. They came from New Mexico, were led by a fellow named Saul Barth to the town, and Saul was the leading member of the community. He was a trader. He provided supplies to the fort and also had cattle. And so in any case, when so the settlement of St. John's by the Mexican American community was right against the Little Colorado River. I say against, on the west side of it, so this side of it, and they were planning to expand out, and they had it was a town of about 400 people in 1880, sorry, and so they were planning to expand their town, but unbeknownst to the people of the St. John's, Saul Barth and Nathan decided
Tenney. Nathan Tenney?
No, Nathan Barth, his brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They knew the Mormons were interested, and so they sold a good portion of the town to the west of where the people were already settled. They sold it to the Mormons, as well as extensive water rights, and so the Mormons started settling there. But first, the Mormons settled in a place called Salem, and that's where the LeSueurs were, a little bit north of St. John's, and so that was fine with the Mexican American community. They were sort of unaware of what the plans were. But then in October of 1880, when Bishop David King Udall showed up, having been called, and he started laying out the town plat with Christopher Kemp, who was first settled there in St. John's, the Mexican American community became alarmed and immediately sent them a note saying, "Stop, we don't want you here, please leave," and they wanted a meeting. But of course the Mormons weren't going to leave, and so there was animosity between the two communities for many years because the Mexican Americans had this land that they thought was theirs sold out from under them, and there were even some Mexican American families living in the community, living on the new, I'll call it the Mormon St. John's piece of land, though they were grandfathered in and were allowed to stay if they wanted. But in any case, so it started off with some animosity and tension in the community.
Did you call those Pupilos?
And then also, just as Carl had said, sort of this part of Arizona was quite, I'll call it lawless, wild. If all of the westerns that those of us my age, Generation 5, LeSueur's 4, Generation 4, that we watched growing up of the Wild West, that was St. John's, that was Eager, that was Springerville. That the gunfight at the OK Corral had occurred in 1881, and so then, as Carl mentioned, the Clantons, the surviving member brothers, they moved up into Apache County, and it was rumored they specialized, among other things, in rustling Mormon cattle and driving them to Mexico to be sold. So this was cattle country, and it was known for many outlaw gangs. And then within St. John's itself, once the community, the existing community of Mexican Americans and then the Anglo settlers who were there, including the Bars, when they saw the Mormons coming in large numbers, were quite upset, and so did just about everything they could to discourage more from coming, and took control of the county and county government, and so the Mormons becoming and also in the mid 1880s, prosecution for polygamy started ramping up in Arizona, and a number of Mormons in St. John's and Apache County were arrested and tried, and several of them were sentenced to prison in Detroit, including Christopher Kemp was one of them. They tried
David K. Udall.
And well, David K. Udall, they tried to prosecute for polygamy, but his second wife went into hiding, and they were unable to, and so then they convicted him of some trumped-up charges of perjury, and so he was also sentenced to prison, and in Detroit. And so it was at this time that large numbers of Mormons left and went to Mexico, including many from St. John's, the polygamists, because of the prosecutions that were here. And one of those, as you may know, was Miles Romney, who was from St. John's, and he was, I believe, the great-grandfather of Mitt Romney as well. And as it turned out, the polygamists from Arizona who were sent to the Detroit prison, they were pardoned after a couple of years in prison by President Grover Cleveland. He was a Democrat, and they were pardoned. And so, as you know, the Democrats are soft on crime, and so they said the polygamists can come on home. So they got pardoned. But in any case, it was sort of after this point that the relations between the Mormons and the Mexican Americans and the Anglo community started to improve, and it partly improved because they needed to band together against some of the cattle rustlers and in the region, and so it was at this time, 1886, that J.T. LeSueur ran for treasurer of the county. And so he was part of this reform effort, and as far as I can tell, I don't know for sure, but as far as I can tell, JT was the first Mormon to be elected to county office in Apache County, and after that, many more Mormons followed into office. And so, in any case, after this, we're talking about the mid 80s, the Mormons and essentially the cattlemen began banding together and moving against what they thought were some of the more lawless elements in the community, or in Apache County. And Apache County at that time included all the way here to Snowflake, and so it was as large as I think I estimate as the states of Vermont and New Hampshire put together. And so you had a sheriff and his deputies who were responsible for law and order in just a huge amount of territory. And so I mentioned this just because by the time we get to the episode with Frank LeSueur and Gus Gibbons and others chasing some suspected rustlers. It was all part of this, not tradition, but just culture. Thank you. A culture of rustlers and cattle and cattle and sheep herders. You know, the LeSueurs were sheep owned sheep. That was just prevalent at this time. But that was it for me, Carl.
Okay.
So if you want to.
Okay, very good, Steve. All right, we're coming up here to St. John's, just over the hill. We're going to turn right at 2nd West and then left at 2nd South to the St. John's City Park. We originally had the St. John's Downtown Chapel booked, but we got bumped because of a funeral, and then the other chapel that we're going to pass here coming into town also has a funeral, and so we got bumped to the City Park. And the upper Ramada next to the restroom was also occupied, so we got the lower Ramada. But the restrooms were up at just across the park. It's just a 1 block square park. The restrooms are up there to use, and Larry and Adele have ordered our lunch from El Cupi those to deliver to us at the Ramada. They're covered picnic tables to eat at. And then we need to there again, not feel too rushed, but at the same time hurry, and we'll get our lunch eaten and get back on the bus and go. We're a little bit behind schedule.
Carl.
Yes.
Well, what time are we getting back on the bus?
It's 11:18 right now.
11:18. What do you think? Just 20 minutes enough time, or
20 minutes?
Is 22 short? Half that? You want a half hour?
No, we've
Why don't
got to
they get
have at
their
least
food
a
and
half
come
an
back
hour.
Half
on the
hour.
bus?
Okay. Can I say 25 minutes?
No.
We'll have a short get on the bus. Well, we've got to be at least a half hour.
No, we're going to eat there. We got to eat. We can't bring it on the bus. That's the next meal we can bring on the bus if we need to.
So if I say 25 minutes, no, I can't say 25.
No, it's got to be a half an hour.
Okay.
Can I share a funny story about the streets here?
Yeah, sure.
So I was here in St. John's a few years ago, and I heard a fun story about the street. It was mentioned that David King Udall set the plats for the street, and that Grover Cleveland pardoned David King Udall. So, if you the main street here is Cleveland Street.
Yeah, very good, and William F. named his youngest son Grover Bruce for Grover Cleveland. Okay, it's
Carl, isn't the J.T. LeSueur's home on Cleveland?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 11:20. We'll have a half-hour break for lunch. So back on the bus at 11:50. We're just, like I say, a little behind schedule, so please be prompt, but enjoy your lunch and enjoy visiting.
Will there be anything said in this half hour out that we'll need to
Out from the area, and some of them will not be going on the ambush site to hear Steve talk about it. So we're going to have Steve talk to him during lunch, and then we're left here. No, next one. Pardon me. Oh, sorry, Curdy, my fault. Okay, there's the city park right in front of us, and we'll turn left to this Ramada.
Go right, they say.
Story on the bus. Those are our new ones. up here for about 10 minutes to proceed.
Yeah, so briefly, Steve LeSueur, I'm related through John Taylor LeSueur, and I grew up in Burbank, California, so we all knew the story, or we knew that Uncle Frank had been killed by outlaws, but pretty much knew that that's about it. And to our knowledge, nobody knew who the outlaws were, and they got away, and there wasn't much publicity about it. But as it turned out, I was wrong. And in recent years, historians who have been interested in outlaw history, they weren't interested in Frank LeSueur or Gus Gibbons, but in outlaw history, have started to track and trace who these outlaws might have been. And we have a pretty good guess now. And so I'll just briefly, since we have a few minutes, to talk about who those outlaws were and what they were doing and how Frank ended up being killed. Now how many of you have heard of Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch? Okay, well, that's who we're talking about here. You must be Warren. Thank you. So in the year 1899, Butch Cassidy and his Wild Bunch gang went to Alma, New Mexico, not too far away, and they were working on a ranch. And what they did on the ranch is they were ranch hands. Butch, in fact, became a trail boss there. And they worked there, and of course they had assumed names. Butch Cassidy was known as James Lowe, or Jim Lowe. But what they would do is every few months, a few of them, 3 or 4, would break off, and they would go rob a train, and then they would come back and kind of lay low, and then maybe 3 to 6 months later, another group would go off, and they would rob a train, and then come back. And so we know of at least 2 major train robberies in the year 1899, which they got over $100,000 in stolen coins and other types of cash. But in early 1900, some Pinkerton agents, one Pinkerton agent, tracked down some stolen currency to Alma and started sniffing around the town, and went to the foreman of the ranch and showed him a picture and said, "Do you know who this is?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's Jim Lowe, my trail boss, great guy." And he says, "No, that's Butch Cassidy, and he's wanted, all through the territories." And so, interestingly, the manager, Captain William French, he wasn't going to turn Butch in. He said he was a good guy, but Butch decided, and the gang decided, all right, our cover is blown, we need to leave. And so in early March, 5 of the outlaws left the ranch, and they started moving up, and they came up through Springerville and were heading towards St. John's. Butch, who was a part owner of a saloon there in Alma, closed up his business. He and another fellow, Bruce Red Reaver, stole some horses, and then they followed, and they were following to catch up. And so these 5 outlaws were, to the best of our knowledge, and it's a pretty good supposition. One of them was known as Todd Carver. His real name was Thomas Hilliard. Another was Harvey Logan, who's also known as Kid Curry. Another was, Ben Kilpatrick. And another was Will Carver. They had been members of another gang called the Ketchum Gang that had broken up. And then the 5th member was Tom Capehart. And so these 5 outlaws headed north, and when they went through Springerville, and they shopped there, bought ammunition and supplies. Oh, and they also had with them about 12 extra horses as well. They were well armed, probably attracted a lot of attention, and then while they were there, they left a letter at the post office for a Jim Lowe to pick up when he came through. And then they went and camped outside of town. And that was March 25th. And then on March 26th, they got up from camp. They headed north towards St. John's. It's about 25 miles from Springerville to St. John's. On the way, they got hungry. They stopped and killed a cow that wasn't theirs. It belonged to a man named Henry Barrett. And the mailman who was traveling from St. John's to Springerville noticed these 5 men eating a cow, carving up a cow that wasn't theirs. And so when he got to Springerville, he reported it. And because cattle rustling was a big problem there, and this counted as cattle rustling. And so they reported it to the sheriff, and the sheriff immediately started organizing a posse to catch these rustlers. And so that was on the 26th. Meanwhile, the 5 outlaws continued on to St. John's. Sheriff Beeler, Edward Beeler, organized a posse. While he was there organizing in Springerville, organizing the posse, Frank LeSueur came down from a sheep camp where he was scouting out locations for their sheep shearing in the spring, and the sheriff summoned him to join the posse. To my knowledge, he did not join the posse there. It's possible, but to my knowledge, he didn't, but rather came home first. So in any case, the posse leaves later that day as well. They arrive in St. John's that night. According to the newspapers and some other accounts, when they arrived in St. John's, the 5 outlaws were in the store, the Arizona Cooperative Store, and there bought more supplies, including ammunition. And according to Alice LeSueur's son, J.T. LeSueur, who was supervisor at the store, sold them ammunition that would later be used in the gunfight the next day. But in any case, Sheriff Beeler arrived about this time. He made no attempt to arrest them, whether it's because he didn't know they were there or because they were in a store and trying to arrest these 5 men, and he only had, at that time, part of his posse, maybe 2 or 3 others, probably would have prompted a gunfight that resulting in lots of people being killed. So no attempt was made. The outlaws went outside of town, just outside of town, camped at the bridge across town, and meanwhile, then Sheriff Beeler, about 11 o'clock that night, regrouped and followed them and tried to find out where they were. So the next morning at about daybreak, Beeler's posse, now he has about 5-6 men, they spot the outlaws camped out, and they move in, but before they got there, the outlaws spotted them, started shooting, and there was a big gunfight at the bridge outside of town. And Sheriff Beeler immediately recognized, he's facing these are seasoned outlaws, these aren't just some guys who killed a cow. He sends one of his deputies back to St. John's to get some reinforcements. But meanwhile, the outlaws take off, and Sheriff Beeler chases them, and they ended up on a running gun battle for about, according to newspapers, 10 to 15 miles. Meanwhile, back in town, the deputy roused some people out of bed as daybreak, including Dick Gibbons, and he gets Dick Gibbons' nephew, Gus. And at this point is when Frank LeSueur joins the posse, and there's 8 of them all together, and they're told, that by the deputy, go to the bridge, that's where the gunfight is, because he didn't know they had left, and join up with the posse. So Frank's group is about 2 hours behind at least the posse. The posse when they show up at the bridge, and but nobody's there except for another deputy who shows them the way and says, they went that way. So this posse of 8 goes to follow the sheriff, and then the sheriff's following the outlaws. So Dick Gibbons and his group follow for I don't know, 10, 15 miles. They don't see anybody, but they're on the trail. And Dick Gibbons decides, he thinks he knows where the outlaws are heading, and so he divides his group in half. And he leads 4 of them go one way. He sends Frank and Gus Gibbons and other 2 young men another direction to follow the sheriff, because he thinks if the outlaws are going the way he thinks they are, they can pinch him between the 2. He'll head them off. So he heads up and he tells Frank's group of 4, you wait, if you don't see the sheriff, wait for us and near this sheep camp that is along the way. Dick Gibbons goes up with his 4. He finds out, no, he doesn't see anybody. He hustles back real fast with his horses to the sheep camp. Meanwhile, at the sheep camp, Frank and Gus and the other 2 young men, they meet a sheep herder who says, "Oh, I saw the outlaws. They were going in this direction, and they were about half an hour behind them." So Frank and his group ride ahead to try and catch them, still thinking the sheriff must be out there ahead of them, though the sheep herder said nothing about the sheriff. So they're gone. So when Dick Gibbons shows up at the sheep camp, Frank and Gus and the other boys are gone. Is this making sense? Is that okay? So they show up, these 4, the other 4 are gone, and at this point, Dick Gibbons and the others, their horses have given out. They've been riding hard all morning long. Their horses give out, and it's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so they decide to go back to town. Dick Gibbons says in his diary, we knew the sheriff was ahead, so those 4 boys would be all right. Dick Gibbons comes back to town. He arrives about dusk, and he's surprised to see Sheriff Beeler and his posse are already back. And in fact, they'd been back since about 10 or 11 in the morning because their horses had given out. And if you remember Sheriff Beeler, he had ridden all day from Springerville to St. John's, about 25 miles. Then he'd ridden all night trying to find the outlaws, found them in the morning, and then he chased them, for 10 to 15 miles, so their horses gave out. So he came back, and so it was just a matter of bad luck that the 2 posses didn't cross each other because Dick Gibbons thought he was still out there. So Beeler comes back, and meanwhile, when he comes back, there's 2 suspicious fellows coming through town who have 8 extra horses, and they look, like they might be connected to the outlaws that he's been chasing. So he detains them, and they're put in jail, and the 2 men give their names as Bruce Weaver and Jim Lowe. That is Butch Cassidy. So he's arrested. Butch Cassidy put him in jail, but Butch Cassidy says, wait a second, I don't know who this guy Bruce Weaver is, though he did, but he said, I don't know him, just some guy picked up on the trail. If you'll telegraph to James French, my boss, at the WS Ranch in Alma, you'll find out I'm a good guy. And so okay, so they send a telegram, though to my knowledge there was no telegraph services in St. John's at that point. They had to go to Holbrook and from there send it. So Sheriff Beeler, he's handling Jim Lowe. One of the boys, Francisco Ruiz, who was with Frank and Gus Gibbons, his father went to Beeler at some point during the day and said, don't you think somebody needs to go out there and see about these men are still on the trail? And Beeler said, don't worry, they'll never even see the outlaws' dust because, they'd had such a huge head start. And so nobody went out after them. They probably would not have found them in time anyway, but nobody tried. So meanwhile, Dick is back, his 4, and there's only 4 boys on the trail. Frank LeSueur, Gus Gibbons, Francisco Ruiz, and
Armijo?
Yeah, Armijo.
That's his last name.
I can't remember. Sorry, I'm 69 years old, and unless I'm looking at my script, I don't remember. But there were 4 of them. And so, any case, they had, as I said, at about 3 o'clock or so, they had been at the sheep camp where the sheep herder said, hey, you're just about half an hour behind these outlaws, 5 of them. So they were following them. Then about 4 o'clock, one of their horses gave out. And so they stopped, and they were about 500 yards from a tall mesa, the mesa we're going to. They're about 500 yards away. They stopped to talk about what to do. And at first, 3 of them wanted to go back, but Frank wanted to go on. And so ultimately, he persuaded Gus to go with him. And so, and we're getting this information from the 2 boys from the Mexican-American community who came back. They said, Frank said, nope, the sheriff's ahead of us, and so he'll need our help, let's go on. So they went on, and the 2 other boys walked their horses back. So Frank and Gus continue up. They get to the mesa. It's a steep mesa draw where they're at, and so they got off and walked their horses up. And so meanwhile, the outlaws were at the top of this mesa, the 5 outlaws. And so what happened next is based on the fact that Dick Gibbons later went back and looked at all of the places where he found casing shells and different things to try and figure out what happened. And so with this evidence and other evidence I've seen, this is my best supposition of what happened. And so the boys got off their horses and started walking them up up this mesa draw. Now they made mistakes themselves in that they had not seen the sheriff all day long. Nobody had, and yet they supposed that the sheriff was somehow ahead, even though they were told it was just the outlaws. Also, anybody trailing outlaws, any experienced person would have known, you don't walk up something like that. You send a scout around because of the danger of ambush. But these were both fairly young men, inexperienced, and so got off their horses. They were walking up, and meanwhile, the outlaws from this mesa, they could see even without. I've been to the top. Even without binoculars, you can see for miles. They saw these 4 young men coming from miles away. They watched them stop, decide what to do. They watched the 2 go away. They watched these 2 come up. So as they were coming up, the outlaws, moved their horses away so that the horses wouldn't smell each other and give themselves away. And then they got behind rocks and boulders and trees up at the top, and they just waited in 5 different positions. So the boys were walking up. Frank was in front, and when they got about 10 to 15 feet away, the outlaws just opened fire. And Frank was killed immediately. Gus, who was behind, was apparently wounded in the stomach. He may have been hit other places, but he was wounded in the stomach, and he had the presence of mind, and he must have been panic-stricken. But he turned and he ran down the hill, and their horses, of course, spooked and just ran away, Frank and Gus's horses. He took off his handkerchief and he put it on his side to staunch the blood as he ran down the hill, and he got about 50 to 75 yards down the hill, but the outlaws came out from behind and opened fire and felled him. So after that, and Frank had been hit, I think about, I'll stop there. I won't go to how many times he's been hit yet, because the outlaws then came out and they rifled through the young men's, through their clothes, pulled out their pockets, stole their belts, and took any money, food they had, their guns, and did it to both men. And then they also shot both of them multiple times in the face. And we know that they did it after they were dead. They had powder burns on their faces, and they also, in the case of Gus, he never could have gotten down the hill, had he been shot beforehand. So Frank was shot at least 5 times, and Gus 6 times. So so are we need to wrap up. Oh, so in any case, then they didn't come home that night, obviously. The next day, J.T. LeSueur, Frank's father, woke up Dick Gibbons and said, we need to go find out about the boys. And so Dick Gibbons and Sheriff Beeler and Will Gibbons, Gus's brother, and Will Sherwood, who was Frank's childhood friend, they went out and they ran into the two young men who had broken away, Francisco Ruiz and the other boy, and they told them, oh, here's where we left, here's where we saw them last. And so that's when they went up and they found the two murdered men. And I'm getting the high sign, so that's the major highlights.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Very good. On the bus fast as you can.
All right, now let's get on the bus as fast as you can.
You're from Burbank?
Yes.
I used to live in North Hollywood a long time ago. And I
In one of the
got-
North Hollywood wards then? Or,
Yeah. And I saw in this book that we got later from the North Hollywood State.
Yeah.
And there was a John T. LeSueur on the High Council.
That's my dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember Keith Barton?
The stake president. Yes.
Keith Barton and Dean Moser.
Yes.
They were all just lived down the street from me.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that Barton.
And
Do you have that written down?
Well, I'm writing a book.
Are you?
And it'll be, I've got a publisher, Signature Books in Salt Lake City.
Who are you?
I'm Steve. And so it's coming out in 2023, or 2023, yeah. So I turn in the manuscript at the end of this year. It takes about a year in the process. And then it will all be written down.
Okay, awesome.
Did you know Paul Wynn?
Oh, yes, he was in my ward.
Because he was a best friend of my husband's for
Oh,
his
yeah.
whole life.
Yes.
And my husband just passed away last December, but we still keep in touch with Paul.
Oh, yeah, no, Paul very well, and his kids.
His son was a regional representative.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, well, it's thank you for telling me. Bruce,
Hey, how you doing? I didn't mean to be rude to do that, but I
no.
If you wanted to use an audiovisual, that was yours. So.
Yeah, and this is my wife, Kathy. This is Warren. I remember I said I talked to him.
How you doing? Very good to meet you.
Yeah, I thank you. And so I met, let's see, are your brothers Steve and Kent? No.
My brother's in Ireland right now. But anyway, it might be interesting for the plane to look at.
Yes, so thank you very much.
I don't like paperback books, by the way. I hope hopefully you'll have some hardbacks for some of the old people like me. But I always put those in plastic because I get them wet. I just got a book wet, and so I had to buy another one.
Did you write this?
No, a guy that I minister to did. And he is he's the grandson of Butch Cassidy, I think.
Of Sundance, and he's Butch Cassidy's partner.
Yeah. So Sundance.
Yeah, and so Warren, this is my brother Jeff. He lives in Utah. And my nephew Carl, and my sister-in-law Mary.
Great to meet you.
Oh, okay. And so Warren, among other, he called me up because he had this book he wanted to give to me. Also owns a car dealership in Mesa, and he is just about everybody here has probably purchased a car from him. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, probably. Here, can I take this out of your
Oh yeah, you go ahead and put it there.
Excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
It's fun to learn more things. You taught me some cool things the other day privately. That was cool.
Okay, and you get in the picture too.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you wanted me in it, but
Oh, okay. Now, I guess now you're out.
okay.
Oh, so we see you at the site then?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
This will probably be bloody now.
Yeah.
That was Warren, who is what?
Oh, I can't.
Just another LeSueur.
Yeah, he's another LeSueur. Yeah. And see the heavy guy over here through there. He's from here. He's not a Mormon. but he paves, or not paves, but he makes the roads out here. And so Carl contacted him to make sure that the roads, and that the road is in condition that we could ride it, so that a bus could go there and turn around. Because previously, the bus, even if it could get there, wouldn't have been able to turn around. We'd have to back up for 3 miles or something.
If you're 6 feet away and outside, you can take your mask off. I want you in your team. There we go. There we go.
Do you want a picture with you?
Okay, yeah, good idea. Sandy's going to take one with all of us.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, LeSueur.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now you can have your stuff back.
Okay.
That was great, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
So interesting.
Oh, well, good.
Like another half hour.
Yeah, I had my script here, but so I couldn't remember. But it wasn't time to look at it now, so I just had to do the best I
You
could.
didn't expect to do this.
No.
And then you're going to finish it up there?
Yeah, well, or maybe on the bus, but I will tell you that if there's interest, like later, I did a Zoom call with Mary's kids and family where I gave a presentation.
We had a family reunion, and all of my kids were there, and we put him up on the television screen, and he told us the whole story.
So I have a slide. Yeah, so I would be glad to do it so you could.
It was so great.
And so you even get to hear the rest of the story.
That would be great.
Yeah, so I'll be glad to do it if
Really?
Yeah.
That's very generous of your time.
Well, I'm retired now, but no, I enjoy doing it, and often I get questions I hadn't thought of, and I got to go look that up.
Yeah.
So in any case, if there's still interest,
Is that the microphone?
or that's a, yeah, it's the recorder. We've been having our conversation. So in any case, of Sheriff Beeler chased everybody, but then also there's more to the story of Frank and Jenny that is not quite what our faith promoting thing talks about. But it's not awful. But it's just very interesting what actually happened afterwards with Frank and Jenny.
Yeah. But did they even have a relationship?
Well,
Or was it just supposition?
They apparently did, but it wasn't what James thought, because James was gone. And they may have only met once at a dance, and Jenny wasn't even dead at the time that James said he came back and all this happened.
Oh, really?
She didn't die for 2 more years. And then they weren't sealed together for even 2 years after that, because Jenny's mom didn't want to do it.
Well,
even though in James,
did they even ask her?
well, that's the thing. In James's telling, she came to the LeSueur family, shortly after Frank died, and said, my daughter died, and she came to me, or she said Frank came to her on our deathbed, and they were to be sealed together, and so she came to them right after, a month or so after Frank died. But in reality, it was after Jenny died, 2 years later, that James and Geneva came to them, because they'd been searching for who did James see in his vision, and Geneva had been writing to people. He got a dead daughter, and so when they heard Jenny died, that's the girl. So they ride. I mean, it was the next day. Jenny's laid out on her deathbed. They come in. The family's there. They tell them the story, of James's vision and how that was the girl, and asked that they be sealed together, because James and his wife were going to Salt Lake the next month, and so they could do the sealing. Tell them the story, and Jenny's mother, Elena, says, no. She says, Jenny died mine, and she's going to stay mine. Of course, it's the day after she died. It's kind of, like, you want me to give her away to you? And so they couldn't convince her. They go away. And the kids, Jenny's brothers and sisters, they were begging their mom, please do it. And they couldn't convince her for a long time. Oh, and I forgot to say, after the LeSueurs left, then Olena, their mother, turned to the kids and said, now I'm going to tell you the real reason. She says, the LeSueurs are rich and we're poor. And as soon as I agree to have Jenny sealed, they're going to go around telling people I came to them to ask that my daughter be sealed, to their son. And she says, I would turn over in my grave before I'd have people think I did that.
Oh my gosh! But eventually, it did happen.
Two years later, she finally relented, and then Frank's sister, Alice, and her husband were going up, and they sealed themselves, or stood in proxy for Frank and Jenny, and that's the story. And so that was the story, of course, LeSueurs have been telling. And this alternate story didn't come out until 60 years later, when Jenny's older sister Lottie, who had introduced Frank and Jenny, she read James's story and she said, that's not true, that's a lie. And so she wrote the true story of and I found two versions of hers, which are.
I remember it being in a book called like some collection.
Yes.
Like Everlasting.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I inherited that from my grandparents.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So.
That is so. Yeah, I remember reading that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and
Okay.
So that's part of the rest of the story.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna.
The sauce on the bus, or you just want to take this?
I'll
It's
just.
kind of dry without it.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it.
What you doing? Spraying them up That was good. It went really well.
Okay, good.
There's no way you could have shortened it.
Yeah. People quieted up, so I guess they were listening.
There was a lot of attentive listeners.
Oh, thank you.
I had to hear the rest of the story before I went to the mountain.
Oh.
I didn't want to hear how many times or what. But
They got shot. Yeah.
It was horrible that they shot him in the face. They were already dead.
Yeah.
Why did they have to do that?
It was pretty brutal, and their faces were quite mutilated, which upset the community quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah. On the way back, when they were bringing the bodies back in a wagon, and Mallory, I can't remember his first name, Warren was one of the ones who came back with the body. But they stopped at a house to wash him, just but Dick Gibbons said it didn't help much. And
just can you imagine being the mom or the dad or family members?
So we're coming into Sholo, the town named by the turn of a card. We'll be driving on Deuce Clubs Boulevard. How many of you have had your parents tell you the story when you were kids and still hear the story all the time? What story?
No, I want to hear it.
Okay, well, every time I came through here, I'd have my mom tell me the story. I'd have all of us kids, she'd tell us the story. Marion Clark and Gordon Cooley were ranching partners here, and they decided to split up, and one would stay and one would leave town, and they had a poker game over who would get the ranch. It was called 7-Up. They got down to the end of the card game, and it was still tied, and finally they said, hey, let's just cut the deck, and whoever can show the lowest card gets the ranch. The other guy's got to hightail it out of here. And so, of course, you probably know that the clubs is the lowest suit in a card. You know, hearts is the highest, I believe, and then spades, then diamonds, then clubs. So clubs is the lowest suit. Anyway, Clark told Cooley, cut the deck if you show the lowest card if you can. And he cut the deck, got the lowest card in the whole deck, the deuce of clubs. And he says, show low it is. And that's, according to tradition, that's how the name got, the town got its name, and they named the street here Deuce of Clubs, and it's a big deal here, that card game. Well, 20 years ago, they built a little statue of that card game just off to the left here, and a couple blocks and a block over to that card game. But that got a lot of historians, those pesky historians, started looking into things a little more, and they did some research, and they found out Sholo got its name 5 years before the card game. I started reading journals and things. The governor of Arizona had even visited here before, and said he visited Clark's and Cooley's ranch in Sholo, on Sholo Creek, and all that was before this card game. It all happened in their 1871 instead of 76 when the card game took place. So, and they looked in the journals and census and different things, and saw that, well, it wasn't quite that way. And they pieced it together, and if you go online, you can see 2016 Anthony Cooley gathered together all this research and put down what really happened. 5 years earlier, Gordon Cooley and his friend Henry Dodd were gold prospectors in this area, and they befriended the Apaches here. In fact, Cooley married an Apache woman he called Lily, and General Crook was coming through here, and those two, he hired those two gold prospectors, Dodd and Cooley, to help map out the General Crook's trail across Arizona in the Apache Wars. The Apaches here were friendly with the Army and had scouts that helped them. In fact, Cooley went with the scouts and fought in battles with the scouts, and they were famous for how fast they moved and how well they fought. So Cooley must have been quite someone to stay up with the Apache scouts in these battles. But anyway, he eventually he settled down with his wife and his child, and they settled down at this place because when he and Dodd were prospectors, they had said, hey, this would be a nice place to have a ranch on this little creek here, and so Cooley came back and did it. But had already been, he and Dodd had already called it Sholo. And here's what happened. Cooley always liked to play cards after dinner with Dodd to see who had to do the dishes. And so they played that game. And so the card game you hear about was 5 years earlier with his prospecting buddy to see who did the dishes. And that's when Cooley got the deuce of clubs and threw it down and said, Sholo it is, and they named the place Sholo. And then 5 years later is when he and Clark, as ranchers in that area, shared the ranch, and they decided to split up. They had a farm of barley and vegetables and some livestock and a ranch house, and so Cooley liked to play cards, so they played a game then to see who would have to move, and it was a poker game, but Cooley won the poker game, and Clark had to move out. So what Clark did, he just moved 5 miles up the creek there, Sholo Creek, and filed a claim up there, kind of like lakeside. So they were still neighbors and friends, and so anyway, that's what really happened. It happened 5 years earlier in a game with a different guy over who did the dishes, but there's a different card game that happened 5 years later over dividing up the ranch. That really did happen. There really was a poker game that Cooley won, but that was not when he cut the deck and they showed low. because Sholo had already been named that 5 years before. I don't know if I explained that real well, but anyway, this is what Anthony Cooley decided here in 2016. Anyway, it doesn't sound so good. That was over who would wash the dishes. I like the traditional older version, whether it's true or not. I like that better.
One correction. Spades beat it hearts.
Oh, spades beat hearts. So what is it? How's it go?
Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs.
Oh, okay. Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. Oh, get that. Erase that.
Yeah.
Spades, hearts. There we go. It's spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs in order of suits.